Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to welcome you all to today's panel on gender and development lessons from the NRLM. Thank you for joining us, and a special welcome to all our speakers. In many ways, today's panel really brings the NRLM story full circle. We have with us those who helped design, shape, and implement the mission over the years, alongside researchers who have rigorously studied its impacts and generated much of the evidence that informs how we understand the program today. This is rare to have these perspectives all in the same room, and I hope today's discussion will be richer because of it. NRLM is widely recognized as one of India's most ambitious development programs. It was launched in 2011 as the National Rural Livelihoods Mission and then renamed the Deen Dayal Antyodaya Yojana NRLM mission in NRLM in 2015. It has supported the formation of millions of self-help groups across rural India, creating a platform through which many women have accessed not only financial resources and livelihood opportunities, but also greater voice, agency, and collective power. Alongside the program's core mission, initiatives such as the MKSP have expanded this vision, strengthening women's roles in agriculture and rural livelihoods. Together, these efforts have made the NRLM one of the world's largest platforms for advancing women's economic and social empowerment. We are fortunate today to have an exceptional group of speakers representing different perspectives. We will begin with Dr. Pramod Kumar Singh from IRMA Anand, Dr. Anjini Kochar from 3IE, and Dr. Ashwini Deshpande from Ashoka University. All of them will reflect on the evaluations that they have led and the lessons that these offer through the lens of gender. We will also hear from Amarjeet Sinha and Neeta Kejriwal from CSEP, who will draw on their experiences as practitioners who are closely involved in the design and implementation of the program. Their insights will really help us unpack the how and the why behind what the evaluations reveal. Finally, we are delighted to be joined by D. Balamurugan, former CEO of Jivika, Rohit Kansal, Secretary, Ministry of Rural Development, and T.K. Anil Kumar, Additional Secretary, MORD. They will bring the policy making and implementation perspective to this conversation and will also include some reflections on the way forward for this program. I'll not keep you from our speakers any longer. Dr. Singh, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, delegates on the dais and learned audience sitting here. How can I navigate those slides? Any idea? It's here.
Yeah, this is going forward. Yeah, this is going forward.
This is going forward. All right. So when I got this invite, we did 4 studies, NRM and allied studies, and wondering how to put them together. And across these studies, what I realized that the core proposition, which is the program participants creates opportunities, but the empowerment is stronger when women can use those opportunities, also make decisions and exercise authority and retain those benefits. And that is what we are trying to look at across these studies. Now, if you look at the left side, these are what the program often counts. These are the things to be undertaken in the program, but it's the empowerment has its own pathways through access to exercise, to control, and the benefits. And that is what we are going to come up with across these 4 studies. Now, the studies which were conducted between 2017 and 2020, and these are all related to NRLM and similar kinds of approaches. So the first study was very nascent when we started in 2016. It was the NRLM was quite in a nascent stage. And we were asked to look at the systems and processes which came under an National Rural Livelihood Program. So the World Bank supported ones. But when we interacted, that's the time World Bank also wanted that if you could also come up with the initial impacts which are there. So when we already started incorporating the midway. So we designed, certainly we did not have, none of these studies have random control trials. It's all where we have used what we call is a matching, gene density score matching. That's the technique we use because that's the only option we had. But all these were also mixed studies. Apart from quantitative ones, we had qualitative, a strong qualitative approach and fuzzy cognitive mapping approach. This is an approach which is essentially helping to model complex and difficult to model systems based on the causal relationships which are available. And this has been there across all these 4 studies. So if you look at the real sample size and the program participants and the matched participants, you will find that or is similar in each of case. So first, more than 4,400 participants, almost 50-50 in both cases. Tejaswini, which is IFAD supported program in Maharashtra, is the Mavim, which has implemented. And one of the things we looked at here, that is their CMRC, which is equivalent to cluster level federation in case of NRLM, are doing quite well in terms of they started with CMRC to be created first, and then rest of the institutions, their village organizations, and they call VLC, village level collectives, and SHG we created later on. So it's the service model which were designed, and that has worked quite well in their case. Then there was a special package for Jammu and Kashmir, and that was getting over, and there was a case to do that study, especially for Jammu and Kashmir, to continue that special package. And some of the things which we have not come up with, the idea was that those were come outside this, that whether this program is helping the program participants to create more social harmony or otherwise. And we found that really this program is also creating social harmony. And SLAC, which is a Global Environment Facility supported program, funded program, managed by the World Bank and implemented by SRLM in Bihar and Madhya Pradesh. And this is a program on climate resilience, livelihoods. So when program started, that resilience was very hedgy. They started with some of the initiatives. While going for the final evaluation, we looked at what should ideally be the resilience package. So that is how these are all, and it used the institutional platform created under NRLM. Now, considering that these were 4 studies and the objectives were a bit different, so how to now put together in this 15 minutes presentation? So I devised this methodology. So it's more about structured secondary analysis, where we looked at those as a data and then gone with this extraction, coding, appraisal, and synthesis, the way qualitative research works. And that's how and apart from that, the FCM evidence are presented separately. Now, if you look at the way it has happened, this relation of convergence. So what you will find is program enabled only these components, where essentially you have finance, skills, information, group membership. And these are the items which are promoted by the programs. But the real magic happened when these institutions start functioning the way it was supposed to be functioning. And that has really created whether it's access or exercise or control or benefits are going to accrue or not. And based on the outcomes were really realized. This is one slide which we are bringing from the national studies, because that's the time when quantitatively it was difficult to ascertain whether the impacts are coming. Then what we looked at all program participants. This is not going to the control groups. Program participants and program functionaries. When we say program functionary, largely the state level functionary, district level functionary, and part of block level functionaries. So about 2,200 program functionaries, program participants, and about 150 program functionaries. We asked them on these 22, 23 parameters and asked them their perception in a scale of 1 to 10. And they came up with these kinds of ideas, which probably the later studies will try to reflect whether those are achieved or not. What you will find that the access to microfinance, that is, the members were looking at this was really a good thing for them to happen because it was the informal credit which were available to them. With this program, they were able to access this. So this is something which they valued a lot. And that's why you'll find that the program participants rated them at very, very high. Then some of the items which you will find, especially in the right side bottom, especially those will be personality development, self-esteem development, women empowerment. Some of these items you will find that the program participants rated very, very high, which the program functionaries were not able to visualize. So that was the major findings in this. Then I will use some of those quantitative data and try to look at how in some of the parameters, because each has a different kinds of different kinds of objectives. But I'm going to pull out wherever these empowerment components were available. So what you will find here is the process we created an index to compare it well. So program group value divided by mass comparison group value multiplied by 100. So that you create this index to compare. And here 100 is the max comparison group. So in the comparison of those mass group, control group, we are going to report the data. So what you will find, the participation, SHG participation, monthly saving, SHG savings. So that has been quite significant in this area. And village level governance meeting, especially their participation in the panchayat, that has been high. And same thing with the Tejaswini program, Maharashtra's program, self-operating bank accounts. So you will find this very high. Again, we will look at livelihoods. For livelihoods, we are looking at not the national one because that time it was not visible enough. So it's the Tejaswini and JK the study, which is really showing these. So be it household operates an enterprise or annual sales or household or female work participation or female enterprise ownership. In Jammu and Kashmir, it's the value is very, very high. Probably only those are because we hardly find any such things available in the control groups. And that's why these are, but if we really go with a larger sample, probably one could look at differently as well. But that's anomaly. Again, household agency in terms of their voice within the house. And what you will find is that's also getting corroborated in the national studies. In FCM-based studies, you will find those are very high, but here quantitatively also there is me and it is clearly visible. So what essentially changes is the collective efficacy does not automatically change into rules of formal policy bias, which is the institutionalization where SHG and VO formation and CLF. So it's largely the VOs who were the major, I would say, powerful voice. One is within Panchayat and also when it is engaging with the block or district officials. They were the one who played that role. Then from Slack, Slack was a different one because qualitatively it's very rich program. So what was the main part of this is you will find that their hyper local climate information were created. So Skymet were asked to install every village automatic rain gauge and every 5 village automatic weather station. And data were captured, going to another agency who used to analyze their data and create into advisories and sending to the participants on their cell phones. So it's not only the climate information, but I would say climate services where they were asked to, yeah, I need only 2-3 minutes. So they were asked to, provide the kind of actions they need to take. And that has essentially helped them a lot. And you'll find especially, and based on that, many agroecological practices which were evolved, especially these SRLMs worked with agriculture universities and came out with those practices. And you'll find that CRPs who were having better knowledge about those practices, those villages has shown better results. So you will find those results, especially in food security, income security, biodiversity increase, and resilience in general. In those projects, before the project and after the project, because here their idea was to also monitor that. This is a comparison which is looking at all these findings together. So what I'm trying to look at here is you will find that it's the access and exercise which has a strong component here. The clear evidence is the strongest for access and exercise, and finance and collective action shows a strong coverage. Then enterprise and household action shows moderate progress, whereas evidence on control, retained benefits, assets and unpaid work is much thinner, and former political outcomes are mixed kind of up. Yeah. With this, we can come up with the 5 evidences, 5 findings which can be supported well. Those are the formal finance and group participation expand most clearly. Women public problem solving capacity increases. Economic aggregation expands, but broad-based and sustained income gains remain highly uneven. Climate resilient solutions can create knowledge and recognition, but real is whether those are carried forward or those are forgotten. And we have seen that those are getting carried forward. So I visited last year, February, and we have seen that the initiatives, the agroecological measures which they have started, is still those are being practiced. And control over access, digital resources, and time remains under measure. These are the things which are not supported. And if now we need to look at design this, probably these are going to be the approaches. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Singh. Dr. Kochar, yes. And welcome. We have the CEO of Jivika with us. Thank you for being here.
Take this time while they're loading on the presentation to thank you very much for organizing this and for inviting me to be a part of it. And thanks to all of you for showing up and being part of this as well. I look at this, I'm very grateful for this opportunity because every time you get an opportunity like this, it's a time to reflect on what is working, what is not working, how can we do better. And in this particular workshop, very close to my heart, thinking about women and gender and what can we do about that. So I'm going to put my presentation more in this overall picture and go on from there. First have to figure out how this slide works.
The middle.
Okay, so as an economist or economists in general, when we think about income growth, we think about the expansion of markets. So income growth is all about starting from very small village economies and then expanding outwards, going to urban areas and then going beyond that. But if you think then from that viewpoint, you're starting from a small economy where you know everybody. Very often you're exchanging only within the family. So this is a very local system based on trust, and you're expanding outwards. So economic growth is also the process of moving from engaging only with those you know very closely that economic growth can be rephrased as a social problem. How do we transform our economy as a society, and how do we move forward in that way? Okay, so I have to look and see where I'm going as well. There may be an initial market failure which resulted in these small economies. The initial market failures could be in credit. They could be in a generations of schooling failure when we have not provided schooling for anyone. They could be in the labor market. As a consequence of that, we rely on family as a medium of exchange. We have family firms, we have family farms. We still have a problem of contract adherence. How do I make sure that my son looks after me in my old age? How do I make sure that my daughter comes and visits me regularly and lets me be a part of her life? How do we do that? We put this into our culture and we put this into our social norms. And so you socialize your children. This is something I did very early. I told my son, you're going to be looking after me in my old age. And we've all done that. We perpetuated these roles to make sure, when you think of it as, again, going back, you're thinking of some market failure, and you're using the family, and you're perpetuating it through these social norms, and so you get a very high degree of persistence. The small scale of these systems means that economic growth is going to be slow. You can't have much if you're confined in that way. And then the persistence of social norms, particularly when the social norms mean you codify people into different occupations. The son is the one who'll do this, the daughter is the one who'll do this caste can do that caste can't do that. That means we have a society with very low economic mobility and a high degree of inequality in many dimensions. If we then take as policymakers or as a policymaker, if we then say, okay, I'm going to correct the initial market failure, so I'm going to remedy schooling, I'm going to have financial inclusion, but you're layering it on top of a society which is full of these divisions and social norms, what you're going to end up with is a very slow growing economy with a high degree of social inclusion. How do you break out of that? You have to have social change. So if you're layering on all these economic changes, you have to first start with social change. NRLM, and credit to all the people who've been there from the start, it's an amazing program because I have not seen any other program on such a scale which recognizes that the change has to be social. And only after you've achieved that can you put an economic layer over that. It is I'm full of admiration when I think of the program because this is so rare. You can think of school reform, you can think of credit inclusion, and you never have the same recognition that we have to do something more than that if you're going to really achieve a result. There's a first phase, which is the universal social part of it, which is building up this cluster level federation, going from self-help groups to BOs to CLFs. And then there's a second phase, which is the targeted demand-driven income interventions layered on them. It's narrow, it's targeted to a few villages and households at the current moment. The plan is to expand it. It builds on this expansive network. So you've already put into place a social superstructure, a social infrastructure, and you're building onto that. When you get a social structure that works well, then you can have effective aggregating institutions, effective scale, effective learning, and economic growth can then be that much more effective. Okay, this is a broad thing on the studies we have done. It charts out, I'm not going to go into too much detail, it charts out what NRLM does. Starts with, in 2011, with early blocks. The blue line is just showing you the growth of the federation. The yellow line is the phasing in, so it extends to later blocks that come in at a later stage. And then starting 2019, you layer on more income interventions. So NRETP was the broad one, and subcomponents of that are the Model CLF program. Those are the two I'm going to focus on the most in this presentation. Our results, we have these two basic studies. One was the first done in 2019, before the income interventions were layered on. And so that just looked at the federation. We found consumption growth and income growth, but we also found that these increased much more so when the income interventions were layered on through NRETP. And it's only in the 2019 phase, this layering on, that we see consumption diversity, occupational diversity, so some level of transformation of the economy. For those who know NRLM and have been following it, you will be right to be skeptical about this result, about the first result in particular, and also the NRETP result. The reason for skepticism would be because, as I told you, NRETP is a narrowly targeted program. It reaches just a few households. So this is one arm of NRETP, producer groups. Maharashtra is a state that has favored producer groups, but in Maharashtra, perhaps the state that has gone furthest with producer groups, they exist in only a quarter of the villages. And within those villages, there are very few households that are direct members of PGs. A PG is 15 people. Okay, so if I have a program that is so narrow, how could I have the scale or the reach that I'm showing you from our results of the study? What we found in later research, ones that we're still carrying on, is the explanation comes from the Model CLF program.
You can, for Anand, explain all the many abbreviations.
Rakesh, this is from all your presentations from so many years when you used to throw out abbreviations at me. I'm following your example. MCLF is the Model CLF program. And this, again, I think is a huge credit.
What is CLF? CLF.
Cluster level federation.
This comes so naturally to me. It's like asking what does cluster level federation. So we started with self-help groups, SAGs. Those are federated at the village level into a village organization. So you have about 10 SAGs in a VO. And then the VOs, so about 20, 25 villages are federated at the level of the cluster. On average, a block is divided into 4 clusters. So that's how the cluster is specific to NRLM. The Model CLF program is another program, and I just take my hats off to everybody from NRLM. There was, I think, a widespread recognition, and I know people who have supported the program for a long time also felt that. We know there's cluster level federations that work very well. Whenever we ask to go for a field visit, that's where we are taken, and we're all blown away with what they have done. But then I know from the data that the majority of them are not working that well. And NRLM recognized this as well. So they put in a program called the Model CLF program, which said that we are going to give you the resources you need to make sure that the CLF works as it is intended to work. This was not a whole lot of money. The money that was given was actually quite minor, but there was a dedicated person at the block level, a dedicated person at the district level, just to make sure that the CLF was doing what it was doing. So it's a great program. Firstly, I'll show you the results, but it was saying, here's what's possible. If we had done what we had to do, if we could implement it, here is what is possible. To me, when I look at the results, and I'm presenting this now and writing up the papers on it, another way of looking at this, it shows you the failure of not doing what you were supposed to do. So the results are a quarter of what they could be, and we could have done that much more if you could ensure it. So the interpretation, I'm going to show you that the results are mainly coming from the Model CLF programs. The interpretation is that what NRLM did was it built a network exogenously. This is not a network of my friends, not even a network of my extended family, which could spread to 50, 60, 100 people even. This is people who've been put together and told, you're going to be a network. Does that network function? Does it not function? It can't function automatically. Something needs to be done. And my statement is that when that something happens, when they do when they're supposed to do, and they function what they do, then we get this massive economic transformation. Better delivery of training, information dissemination, social learning, and it improves economic outcomes, but it also reverses regressive norms. And I'm going to focus on the regressive norms just because this workshop is on gender. Okay, so we measured social norms in our 2024 survey through a series of questions. And they're closely correlated with the block sex ratio, just to validate that we were actually doing what we did. The red line is an index of all the questions we asked. And then I divide the questions in two broad sets. One is related to work, and the other is related to children, gender preference, etc. So within work, the first orange bar is the aggregate for all the work-related questions. The second is the aggregate for what I call work constraining norms. Work constraining norms are norms that just apply to women and that aren't relative to men. So brides shouldn't work. Women should pay attention to the house first and then consider work. Children suffer if you work. So those are, what I call work constraining norms. Then there's a set of work norms that are male privilege. If there's job scarcity or it's difficult to get a job, then the man must get the job. It's very important to make sure that your husband is supported and the wife will come next. So those kind of questions are male privilege questions. On the gender questions, we have general son preference. Son should be preferred in schooling, son should be preferred in food allocation, etc. And then we have son preference in tasks. Boys should be taught to do what their fathers do. So there's a male sort of things that boys should be initiated in. Girls should not. So girls should not play sports, but it's okay for boys to play sports, etc. So as I said, they line up very nicely with this. What was very interesting is we also collected information on the block from which the woman comes, her natal block. And we can classify those as ones that are more regressive than your current block or less regressive than your current block. And if you look at the dark line, those are for women who come from more regressive blocks. It's the same graph that I showed you earlier. It's the correlation between regressive norms and the sex ratio in the block. But for women who come from more regressive norms, more regressive blocks, regressive norms are much more likely to be held. That incidence is much higher. And it also shows you that the correlation with norms in your block of residence is much less. Your norms come from where you were born and from the family you live with, and they're much more weakly correlated with where you end up and where you go. And that's what's hard to break about that. MCLF, the Model CLF program, significantly reduces the salience of these inherited norms, and the data will come out in a study, the paper eventually, but it's these work-related norms and shows you that they significantly reduce them, which is an amazing achievement. But they did not do that for gender norms, and it also didn't happen in NRETP, which says the takeaway from this is that if the CLS is effective, you can get social learning, you can get behavior change, you can get economic change. But if the CLF is just a collection of people getting together, none of these things will happen. On the flip side, it shows you that we can also make this change happen. So the fact that this was a policy instrument said, we are going to go in there, it's not something that happened endogenously, but was induced by policy and was incredibly effective. How can we have this change? So to explain things again from Rakesh's the question he raised, self-help groups are small groups of 10 women who you know well from your own neighborhood. And that's who you interact with the most, even when you get joined into a VO, even when you're joined into a CLF. Most women don't go to these CLF meetings. So if your interaction is primarily with your self-help group members, how can you have change? The change comes from these community resource persons, CRPs, that are social agents that NRLM promotes within the organization and pays them an honorarium. But they are like network leaders. There's an education bar. You have to have over 8 years of schooling to be a CLF, and you go through CRP and you go through more training. But you can see the data. They're more educated. They're younger. But their norms, they're regressive. Whether we ask them the same questions, you can see that incidence is much less, even compared to women with the same level of education. So if I restrict our sample to those with 8 or more years of education, they have more regressive norms than CRPs. Strong institutions, so basically saying that the change is coming from CRPs, we put them into place and they can make that change. Strong networks and institutions enable greater social learning spillovers. And this graph in particular is showing you that the correlation between the CRP's norms and the women's norms is stronger in MCLFs, the model CLFs, than they are elsewhere. So you have CRPs everywhere, but they are much more effective in the model CLF federations. They are not that effective in other federations. These spillovers need not just be from that; they can also be from economic exchange. And I thought this data was just really amazing to me. This is the correlation between educated women in your local area, all the villages surrounding you. So how educated are the women there? That has a strong effect on consumption and income growth in model CLFs. But the graph below shows you that same thing for non-CLFs, and there's no correlation. So again, just talking to the importance of the federation. What explains the limited impact on gender norms and son preference? I've shown you all the data on work norms, but not this. And I think what we have to recognize is there is a two-way relationship. It's not just from social to economics, but then it goes back from economics to social. So you have to have that part as well. And so I look at NRLM and I say, I feel this is an unfinished agenda. We still have to universalize all the income interventions and make sure that they go forward. And in particular, the pace of structural change is slow. Rural India is still a brawn-based economy, not a brain-based economy. It's agricultural and not non-agricultural. So the returns then are still primarily to physical labor, not to skilled labor. And as a result of which, hours of work profiles are flat for both men and for women, and wage profiles over your life cycle are also flat. So that's the graph on the right, that there's just, if you look at it by age, there really is not that much change. What does this mean? It means you have to depend on your son. You don't have those options. Yeah, I can improve income by 500 rupees, 1,000 rupees. It's not enough to provide for old age. And so we are still dependent on informal networks for other things. We may not be dependent on them for consumption, smoothing, etc. But these big life things, we are dependent on our networks. So if you look across all education groups, including CRPs, all of them say their plan for old age is to live with us, not their daughter. That we ask specifically about a son and daughter. And the only place where you see a change in the gender norms is amongst households in which there's a salaried income. So the two bars on the right say that in those households, you see this movement, but not otherwise. Conclusions. Going forward, MCLF demonstrates NRLM's capacity to really make a difference in rural India. It's a huge achievement. It's success in exogenously building networks. And as I said, I do not know any other economy which has attempted this at such scale. It breaks homophily, which is the tendency for all of us to mix only with people exactly like us. And that has a huge impact on inequality if you can break out of your social circles and meet with other people. When I think on it, I feel that if I had to identify who is the group in rural India that has benefited the most from it, that group is actually CRPs. Okay, so we normally think of CRPs as agent of change, but they are really the largest beneficiaries. And why are they the largest beneficiaries? We've given them skill-based employment. Okay, so everybody else is sort of stuck in physical labor, but here's a group to which we have actually given them some level of employment that can change earnings age profiles and profoundly affect your life. And that suggests a way forward. We can rely on lead agents to ensure spillover benefits to all in the network. It need not just be CRPs. We have, Didi Ki Rasoy and women who work in different networks, etc. We can rely on them. We can, give a few of them that. But if you have built an effective CLF, they will have a spillover benefit on all. Spillover benefits don't occur automatically, but they do exist if the federation works well. And that is, I think, where we should be going. Thank you.
Dr. Deshpande.
Thank you very much for inviting me here. And thanks to the previous speakers for laying the stage so clearly and making my life easier as a result. It's lovely to see everyone in the audience. This is based on a sort of an overview, big picture study I'd done for the World Bank in 2022. So over 21 and 22. And it was nice for me to go over the paper again. It's a very, very large, long paper, and I'm not going to be able to present everything. But here are just some reflections based upon the theme for today's discussion. So the basic sort of two components that I focused on in that paper. One was the entire question of women's empowerment. Because when we talk about SDGs, automatically the question of women's empowerment kind of comes up. Why? Because women are the program's targets. But targeting women doesn't automatically mean empowering women. So I think just because women are the targets, it shouldn't automatically be seen as a women's empowerment program. And so the question still remains to be asked, even though women were targeted, were women actually empowered through the program? It's not an automatically yes answer. The other major question that I looked at in that paper, overview paper, was the nature in which the program was implemented. So if you look at the NRLM structure, and I'm calling it NRLM just, even though the names have changed, I'm just going to use the word NRLM. If you look at the NRLM organizational structure, it runs parallel to the Panchayati Raj institutions. So it's an entirely separate structure with its own funding and with its own organization, and it runs in villages parallel to the PRIs. And there's a talk of convergence between the PRI, activities and services and the NRLM structure. What does it mean? How does it actually play out on the ground? And that actually complicates the program and the implementation of the program to a great extent. And I'm going to explain why. So what did this paper do? So these were the two major themes that I focused on. What did this paper do? One, it took stock of what we know about both of these issues. It did a comprehensive literature review. Every single paper that had been written up to the point I started working on it, I've reviewed in that paper. And also the evidence that, including Anjini's papers, what the published research says about SDGs, about livelihoods, about empowerment, about all the indicators, etc. We also had built in qualitative field work as a part of this program in two states, Jharkhand and Tamil Nadu. And the most exciting part of this paper, from my point of view, was the oral history component. So what I did was I interviewed 8 or to 10 individuals, including Anita here, individuals who were instrumental in starting the program about 30 years ago. And they were both, now of course, most of them are retired from the World Bank as well as from the government of India, and asked them what thought process went through their mind as they thought of this program. What were their challenges? How did they start? Why did they choose one road over the other? And what I have is a very rich set of interviews with these key individuals who sort of conceptualized the program. And I also spoke to Rita, who was at that time, sort of running the show here. And in terms of how does it translate into individuals who are on the ground, running this large, massive program on the ground. So this was what the paper is about. What is the sort of big picture takeaways from the paper? So first of all, as far as credit is concerned, because it's, the self-help groups basically run on savings and credit. So you definitely see the impact there. You do see cheaper credit and more savings. So for example, Jivika cut informal credit use by 14.5%. This is all data from until that point. Maybe these numbers have changed. Interest burdens fell as a result because reliance on informal credit went down. I have, state level assessments, and overall the picture is positive in terms of access to cheaper credit and more savings. It's definitely pro-poor in the sense that the largest gains were seen for the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe households everywhere. So in that sense, the intention of the program, you do see that on the ground. In terms of, I talked about convergence earlier, so you do see an improved access to schemes that are not SDG related, but are meant for the poor. So in general, pro-poor delivery of services did increase in areas where SDGs were stronger. So I look at districts, okay? But the livelihood impacts and the income impacts are uneven. There are cases where you do see impact in terms of increased livelihoods or increased income, but overall they are weak. So the cases where the increases have happened are more the exceptions rather than the rule, right? And consumption gains are seen more clearly than livelihoods gains or income gains. So that's the kind of big picture evidence-based brief. Okay. The assumed theory of change, even though it's never been outlined in so many words, the assumed theory of change in this program is kind of a sequential. So the idea is you get access to credit, you engage in livelihood activities, your income will go up, and the increase in income will lead to empowerment. But actually, when you evaluate the program, the evidence is otherwise. You see an increase in empowerment even without an increase in incomes. So there's greater access to credit, not huge, but federations, I mean, at the federated level, you do see clearer impacts. So the unequivocal result across all SHG, experiences is that participating in the SHG alone enhanced women's empowerment measures in one or more dimensions, whether or not livelihoods or incomes increased. So it was an effect of just being with a network of other women rather than the empowerment coming through an increase in incomes. I did a primary survey in Maharashtra of 10,000 households in Maharashtra's 10 poorest districts. That survey was prior to this study. It was done in 2013-14. In my individual survey, 95% of members reported no new income activity from the SHG fund. But across all indicators of empowerment, mobility, political participation, financial literacy, decision-making, collective action, we see very, very strong results. And these are the poorest women in the poorest districts of Maharashtra. So that, the empowerment result is pretty striking. And it's even more, the effects are higher for women from scheduled caste and scheduled tribe backgrounds, for even within the poor, the more marginalized women. Okay. So what's the mechanism? The mechanism is not really income. It's social capital. It's the idea, there's a famous idea in sociology called the strength of weak ties. So weak ties are those where you have relationships with people who are not your kin, not your family, not your relatives. These are people you don't know very well. But by knowing people that you don't know very well, it increases your social circle. It increases your social capital. And it gives you the potential to do things or learn about things or have the confidence that you will be able to intervene and change things if needed. And it's really the strength of weak ties argument, which is often used in labor markets as well, which is you get better jobs in labor markets if you have weak ties rather than strong ties. And so it goes beyond kinship and caste, but builds personal efficacy and a capacity to act together. So the capacity of the women to be willing to intervene in village disputes, or, we ask them questions about, civic infrastructure. If there's no water, what will you do? If you hear your neighbor's husband beating her, what will you do, etc. Do you think you can act, etc. So we ask them a whole range of questions on economic and social issues. And women who participated in SHGs, and the longer they participated, were much more confident and were much more able to, say that, yeah, we will intervene. And we saw examples of that through the field. So this is the most important result, as it were, and it's sort of, it's pretty robust.
Just one clarification.
Yes.
Is weak ties similar to lowering search costs, or that's a piece?
No. Weak ties is not limited. So we can talk about it. Yeah. So, of course, empowerment has clear limits. Anjini has talked about some of those. So, for example, if you look at intra-household decision-making, it doesn't automatically lead to big shifts within the household. Some of the regressive norms reveal, etc. Particularly hard to move is domestic abuse. You don't see that kind of a difference within amongst women who are SHG members versus not. And I feel that's a little bit of a tall order for SHGs to fix, because it's such an entrenched issue, not just in India, but everywhere else. So to think that by women becoming members of SHGs, they're going to have, some kind of feedback effect that domestic abuse will go down, I think that's a bit of a tall ask from SHG. So I think it's not fair even, but I mean, this is the result that we find. Women do get voice. They say that they are going to be able to speak better. But when we did our field work, we found that, for example, SHG women tended to attend Gram Sabha meetings more. They spoke more and held the floor longer, but were no more likely to set the agenda or elicit responses from officials. So they have greater voice, but not necessarily control over the agenda. All right. Autonomy also has costs, particularly in areas where gender norms are particularly conservative. We asked them about subjective well-being also. So women who reported greater empowerment or autonomy measures also reported lower subjective well-being. And this is known in the literature as a norms violation penalty. When you feel like you're opposing the norms, you feel there's going to be pushback, either actually or perceived, and that can lower subjective well-being. What you will find in this literature is that different papers looking at the same state, same program, have different results. And so there's a lot of disagreement in the literature about what is the size of the impact, what's even the direction of the impact. And you find negative impacts, null impact, positive impacts. All of this has to do with what is being measured and how it is being measured. So measurement in this literature is critical, and you have to really read the fine print to understand which paper is saying what and what the results are. And you do see some of that fine print that I looked at in my paper. Okay. As I said before, the program has always been women-centric. But was empowerment the stated goal of the program when it was conceptualized? So I looked at the early NRLM mission statements, and the word empowerment actually enters the NRLM documents much later. You don't see the word empowerment at the beginning. By 2019, you start seeing the word empowerment more and more frequently in NRLM documents. So the word social and economic empowerment is seen more commonly. And so now we kind of believe that that's how the whole program started. But an NRETP, which is National Rural Economic Transformation Project, that makes it kind of explicit. But the shift was never formally announced. It was never the case that at one point the government said, okay, now I think we need to think of it as empowerment or as targeting empowerment. It kind of seamlessly, silently glided into the empowerment space, but we were not, it didn't start off, at least explicitly, it didn't start off as an empowerment program. Okay, why women? Why was the program targeted only on women? And that's a question I asked in my oral history interviews as well, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But in the key informants, when I talked about that, they said, well, women are easy to work with. When you do mobilize them, they save well, they repay, they meet regularly, because NRLM has the thing of, you have to have weekly meetings, etc. So women are just easier to control, and they will meet, they will save, they will follow rules. And so empowerment was seen more as a means to poverty reduction rather than empowerment being an end in itself. So you give women certain resources and they will work towards certain activities that will eventually reduce poverty in rural India. So that was really, so in fact, if you see the Andhra Society, it's called Society for the Elimination of Rural Poverty, SERP. So the SHG model was seen as a poverty reduction exercise organized through the women. If they get empowered in the process, that's great. But it was not a program aimed, initially at least, towards empowerment of women. Okay? Now, we asked women, many women who did get loans from the SHGs, and we asked them, are you individually starting a business? What's going on? Many women reported that they took the loans for their husbands' businesses, which is fine, as long as it's increasing household income. But the reason that women were given those loans and not men, again, key informed interviews, they said that women are more likely to return them and be careful about the spending. Whereas if we give the loan to the husband, then we just don't know, we have no, So women are seen as more trustworthy, and so that's part of the reason that it was a women-targeted program. Okay. We did fieldwork in 2 states, Jharkhand, it was a new mission. It was a new state as well. And in Tamil Nadu, of course, it's a decades-old program. It wasn't a new program. It kind of predates the NRLM. So we did 98 interviews. We looked at 5 schemes: the toilet scheme, the National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, the take-home ration scheme, etc., the Amma two-wheeler scheme, and so on and so forth. Okay. Now, convergence is a key word that you hear in this story because, as I said, the NRLM architecture runs parallel to the PRI architecture, Panchayati Raj architecture. Now, the word convergence is often used, and officials know very well what it means. But women, when we ask them, what do you understand by convergence? the word had not really reached the women. They didn't really know what it meant and what they were supposed to do. For them, when they were asked to do convergence, basically means that if it's a scheme run by another department of the government, the SHG women should make sure that it gets implemented. So if you have the Swachh Bharat mission, toilets have to be built. Then the SHG women will go and help in building the toilets. That's convergence. As far as they are concerned, they think of it as this is something we have to do. So they don't really see it as convergence. They just feel like that's a task they have to do, which basically means that women become individuals to whom tasks are delegated. They are not in the decision-making seat because convergence will basically means here's a bunch of government programs, now go ahead and make sure that implement them. And in fact, that's how you see the Swachh Bharat mission had the highest success rate because there was a very clear thrust from the government that toilets have to be built and SHG women were mobilized to build those toilets. Of course, it was effective when it was activated because SHG networks are strong, women are reliable, and they got the job done basically, right? So that was one thing we see. Now, I'll probably skip these slides, but basically what we see is in convergence in practice meant that women were trusted with everything, but not often paid extra for the extra work that they did. They didn't even realize that this was over and above their SHG work, right? And so it was some sort of free labor that other government departments were able to mobilize in order to get to do the job that they should have done actually in the first place, not the SHG movement, right? There's instances of payment failures on the Rural Guarantee Act, take-home ration scheme. There was high risk, high value ration contracts could yield real earnings, but severe payment delays meant village organizations borrowed to keep the program afloat, absorbing the state's risk. So the SHG, basically the apparatus took on a lot of the risks and took on a lot of the hard labor of implementing programs that other government departments should have done. All right. So again, the overall story, let's skip this slide, but overall you see the story that you see is that they are unpaid foot soldiers. They are loyal, they do the job, and that's why it's seen as very important. We're quietly building the pathways, but not necessarily their role not being acknowledged, and that also leaves the other government departments with some sort of a free hand, that they don't really need to do because the SHG women are going to do that. Right? But the personal gains still remain tangible. So confidence, mobility, skills, motivator status, all of these things you still see even in these scenarios. Okay, I'll skip the javelin. All right. So when I'll just spend 2 more minutes on this sort of the early days of the program. And so when the program was already early days, when it was being conceptualized, there were sort of 2 alternative models. One was what is called in this world the Andhra model, which is the road that was taken, and there was the panchayat-led model that was the road that was not taken. All right. So what was the panchayat-led model? That the SHGs will work with the local governments involving men and community. So it was not meant to be only a women-based program. It was meant to be a community-based program and included men. All right. And there are examples of these kinds of programs in Tamil Nadu, in our country, as well as in other countries. And women are central in this program, but not the only players in the program. The Andhra model is the model that actually won this debate, and that's the one that we see now, which mobilizes women exclusively in SHG federations built parallel to an independent of elective panchayats. The logic for this is that panchayats get taken over by men, by political parties, and we want women to be, do all of, to earn livelihoods, and so that objective might get derailed if they are integrated with the Panchayati Raj institution. I have a lot on why the Andhra model won, but I'll skip that in the interest of time. So when the program scaled up, as it is doing now, what was kind of lost on the way? First of all, capacity is the binding constraint. The idea may be good, but as long as if there's not enough capacity in the village, it won't work. The gender agenda of the program. The greater the responsibility of convergence that falls on the SHG women, the view is that the gender agenda kind of gets diluted. It's women-centric, the program, but not women-owned. It's very much defined by the NRLM leadership in Delhi. It is, which is mostly male, sorry. But the Radhakrishna committee member, for example, the Radhakrishna committee had no women members. So a program that is completely mobilizes women has no female leadership at the top. And so it comes up, for example, I don't know whether it's changed, but earlier, the way in which the women should be sitting in the SHG meeting was also specified by the New Delhi, even though in Maharashtra we saw that they didn't really like to sit that way. They would just sit in a different way. But the facilitator would say, no, please sit in that particular circle because that's the way we are supposed to sit. Now, if a woman had been in the leadership, I don't think any woman would have specified how the women should be sitting or what particular song they should be singing. In Maharashtra, we saw that they had their own songs. They were singing their own songs, but the facilitator would say, no, ek baar wo gana zarur ga dena. So you know what we are supposed to be singing. So these kinds of rules. So not being owned by women at the top, I think is a very important aspect that we need to take seriously. And of course, we've reached a stage now where har marz ki dawa is SHG. कुछ भी कराना हो गांव में तो SHG की औरतों को बोल दो, वो कर देंगे and कर भी देती हैं वो औरतें. But the point is that's not what the program should be. It's not a cure for every ailment. Women are already burdened by multiple burdens, including the care burden, housework, etc. Now you want to say eliminate rural poverty also while you're at it. That's a really big, tall ask from the women. And so I think that we need to think more holistically about how to solve rural poverty and why the responsibility should only be on the women to solve rural poverty is a question that we need to ask ourselves. It's a great program. It has mobilized millions of women. It has given tangible benefits. And there's much that we can learn from this program, but it should not be seen as a cure for every ailment in society. Let me stop here. Sorry, Fabio.
No.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining in this panel discussion. So now you've heard three very eminent researchers talk so much about NRLM, its successes, its shortcomings, and its challenges. I think all have agreed that despite its challenges, despite its shortcomings, there have been huge successes also in the program. And what I will be talking about is what is it that NRLM did differently in terms of governance systems and in terms of community processes that perhaps resulted in much of this success. And in the second part of my presentation, I will also talk about the gender strategy that was later adopted by NRLM and the mechanism set for gender empowerment. So this is basically the mission of NRLM. And prior to NRLM, there were many anti-poverty programs, but they mostly focused on asset transfer or one-time skill provision. But what was different in NRLM is that we talked about working through the grassroots institutions of the poor and specifically grassroots institutions of the rural poor women. So what is it that was distinctive about NRLM? The first thing is that it invested a lot of time, energy, and budget in building the systems all across at the central level, in the states, etc. So mostly you'll find in most government programs, it was by one executive order that the programs are implemented. But in the case of NRLM, it existed simultaneously with the precursor program, the Swarn Jayanti Gram Sarojgar Yojana, for 2 years. And this gave all the states enough time to develop their systems, the SRLMs to be set up, the professionals to be recruited, to be trained and put in place, and all other systems like the procurement, financial system. So the entire skeleton was really built in most of these states in these 2 years, and that helped a lot in the very smooth implementation thereafter. It also created a dedicated professional implementation architecture. Before NRLM, I think in terms rural development or anti-poverty programs were supposed to be anyone's ball game. But NRLM realized that poverty was a very complex issue, and tackling it was not a very easy affair. If you wanted to address poverty and also try to sustain income enhancement, etc., it required long-term hand-holding of the rural poor families. And this could be done only by professionals who had experience in various areas of work, like financial inclusion or livelihoods or institution building. So it was not anyone's ballgame. And therefore, right from the center, from MORD level down to the sub-block level, professionals were recruited and placed, trained professionals. So we had the state rural livelihood missions in every state, and professionals at the state level, district level, block level, and sub-block level also. And at the central level also, there was this National Mission Management Unit created under MORD, which had experts from different areas of work. NRLM provided a national level framework. There was no strict guidelines. I know there has been talk about not enough flexibility being in the program, but I beg to differ. I think there was a lot of flexibility given. A framework was given. The core idea of the program, that it will be based on women's institutions, etc., were laid down, but there was a lot of flexibility given to, because NRLM realized that different states were at different levels of development. The needs were different, so every state needed to do its own thing in its own way. So within this framework, the states would be doing annual action planning, and so there was sufficient flexibility in adopting whatever activities they wanted to undertake. There was bottom-up planning and community ownership. The initial plans would, of course, be prepared by the state rural livelihood missions, but once the strong community institutions had been set up, the planning, and CEO Jivika is here, he'll bear me out also, the planning was happening right from the cluster level federations. Their actual requirements were taken and aggregated at different level, block, district, and state level, and then came to the Ministry of Rural Development for approval. So there was complete community ownership and very need-based and democratically planned also. There was a lot of participation with NGOs and other partners. It was very clearly realized that this poverty is a very complex matter, and it cannot be government alone doing this program and hoping to address all the issues. It required the experience, the skills of various other partners, NGOs, etc., and also private players, particularly in livelihood matters, in supporting marketing, etc. So enormous number of partnerships were got into by the center, by each of the states in every area of work. The role of the Ministry of Rural Development also was drastically changed. So mostly, prior to NRLM, the role of the ministry used to be just to release funds and then monitor the program. But here the role was changed to active facilitation, to provide technical support to all the states, mentor the states. So this change in role also helped in a lot of cross learning among states. The National Mission Management Unit played a very important role in ensuring that whatever is happening well in one state is taken to other states. And there were so many workshops, so many exposure visits undertaken, which facilitated that. And then provisioning of adequate budget. So before 2021, the annual budget of NRLM used to be something like 3,000 to 5,000 crores. But after 2021, as you can see, it was in 2021, it was almost doubled. And this was a time when NRLM was actually achieving scale. So there was a lot of requirement of funds for providing, for capitalizing the community institutions, and the ministry could provide sufficient and adequate resources. And as you can see that since then it has exponentially gone up, and now it is close to 16,000 crores, and the expenditures also have been close to 100%. Yeah, women have been placed at the center. I know Ashwini just spoke about it, and they said that it's simply because they are easy to mobilize. But I think right from the beginning, there were some other ideas also in the people who actually designed this program. One was that in SGSY, we had seen that the women's collectives had survived a lot. So women are able to work better in collectives. To that extent, Ashwini were absolutely correct. But the other ideas also were that if you put resources in the hands of women, they use it differently. They use it for the benefit of the family. So trying to address poverty through women made sense. And also okay, I'll go to the next point. So combining SECC data with community-led PIP process. PIP is basically participatory identification of poor process. So the women or the households that were to be targeted were actually identified by the community itself, and then we also had the socio-economic caste census data available with the ministry, which listed the rural households according to the deprivations they were facing, and these two together were actually used to identify. So what happened was that one was that the targeting was very good, and the other was that the community actually understood the whole process. They understood what was poverty, and they also owned this whole process. Next was that institution building was prioritized first. So in the first few years of the implementation of the program, the focus was on building very strong institutions. And as the previous speakers have also said, that the other layering of like livelihoods or the social development related efforts came later on. This was maybe a conscious strategy of the mission also, because unless you had very strong institutional structure, there was not much you could build on it. So a lot of time and this Puritan kind of approach was taken initially, and later on it has been delivering a lot of benefits. The resource block strategy. This is a very interesting concept. We have already heard about the community resource persons. So these community resource persons were actually women from the self-help groups, and they had come out of poverty by being a part of the self-help groups, and they were given further training. So these women have been helping in all kinds of activities under the NRLM. So coming back to resource block strategy, normally what happens is a program is implemented all across the country all at once. But in NRLM, what we wanted was to have a very organic kind of scaling up through creation of the social capital of women. So what we did was that every state which wanted to start NRLM would identify a few resource blocks, and SAG members or CRPs from other states like Andhra or Bihar who had advanced very mature institutions, CRPs from these states would come to the new state in the resource blocks and initiate the institution building process. And in the process, the staff of the resource block would also be trained, and the external CRPs would also identify in potential internal CRPs, so that the social capital was created within the state, and with the help of that, gradually this whole program was scaled up in each state. So it was a very effective, very organic scaling up, which resulted in the CRPs being in the community itself. They had the trust of the community. They were embedded in the community and always available. So CRPs were there not only for institution building, but in every aspect of the implementation of NRLM, we have CRPs. So we have now, I think the mission now has more than 9 lakh community resource persons working as Krishi Sakhi, as Pashu Sakhi, as Poshan Sakhi, Swachhta Sakhi, Bank Sakhi, banking correspondent agents, and working very effectively, doing amazing work at the field level. Then there was a creation of a resource pool of trainers. So for every aspect of the program, it's a farm livelihood or non-farm or social development, financial inclusion, a pool of trainers was created, and this was done through a very robust process. It was done at the central level also, and all the states also did. So whenever any state wanted to do any training in any area of work, there was a ready-made pool of trainers available to them. They could easily access. Financial inclusion has been one of the successes of the programs. More than, I think, 13 lakh crore of credit has been mobilized by SAGs from the banks, and NPAs have been close to 1%. They are close to 1% now. This was achieved because financial inclusion was taken as a process. It started with the savings and interloaning, but it also included very good bookkeeping. At the SAG level, standardized books of accounts were prepared, the bookkeepers were trained, and because there was this credit discipline of repayments of good bookkeeping, the banks also saw them as potential viable clients, and therefore so much of credit could be mobilized by the women. Livelihood planning again was driven by the community. The approach that the mission took was that the staff is there not to actually direct the community to do this, that, or the other, but to facilitate whatever they want to do. So help them in deciding what kind of skills they have, what kind of resources are available to them, and what kind of activities can be taken up, and then facilitate them through skill training, through access to resources, etc. So this basically gives a picture of NRLM, the institutional platforms of the poor are at the center, and everything there is to support and build on this institutional platform. I'll now go to the gender resource centers and the gender strategy. These are some of the statistics. Gender disparity in India is huge. As earlier speakers also talked, there was some kind of an underlying theory of change initially, that if the women are collectivized, if they are given financial inclusion, livelihood support, etc., that would automatically result into empowerment. But gradually the mission realized that this is not true, that it does not automatically lead to empowerment. It requires a gender intentionality to be built into all aspects of the program, and it also requires some mechanisms to be created which could actually support in the gender related issues, and the women could easily access that and sustain whatever solutions are provided. So with that in mind, the mission introduced the gender strategy. This, again, as I said, most of the layering was done at a later stage, so it was maybe after 2016-17 that we actually started implementing this in a focused manner. And so it was a two-pronged strategy. It was one was to build the gender intentionality, as I said, in all program components. So every training that you have, every activity that you implement should have a gender component in it. So, for example, the mission was promoting kitchen gardens. And this kitchen garden was for the purpose of nutrition requirements of the family, as well as some livelihood activity could come out of it. But if there was not enough sensitization or awareness provided along with this activity, as you know, that what would happen is that the nutrition would go to the male members or children, and the women would be last to actually get it. So it was the kitchen garden activity would actually be complemented by some kind of sensitization, some kind of awareness about these gender-related issues. So similarly, in all the activities, we try to bring in the gender intentionality. And the other was to have the institutional mechanism to address the gender-related issues. Very close now. So the gender strategy adopted was that At the SAG, it's not village organization. Actually, at the SAG level, there will be a gender point person, again, a SAG member who has been trained. At the village organization and cluster level federation, there would be social action committees. All these women who are the gender point person or social action committee members would be trained in gender related issues, how to recognize them, how to provide counseling and support for all such issues. And then there would be gender forums at the panchayat and block level. So these would have SAG and members of the institutions, as well as panchayat sarpanches or ward members, and at the block level, some of the administrative functionaries of the block level. The final was the gender resource center. So mostly, all gender related issues would be sorted out at different levels. But if it could not, it could be brought to the gender resource centers, and directly also women could come to gender resource centers. So these gender resource centers are at the block level, and they are all run by women. And one cluster level federation would be the nodal body for the gender resource center. And what they would do is, once a grievance is received, it's very, very well managed. The grievance is received, and then it is registered very properly. It is deliberated upon, action is taken, it's resolved and disposed of. And then the cluster level federation, which is the nodal one, will also monitor and review. So obviously there are many key stakeholders, because gender issues cannot be sorted out only by the Gender Resource Center. There are many other key stakeholders involved. So a lot of collaboration is being attempted with the police department, the one-stop centers set up at the district level by Women and Child Development, the block administration, and then there is the District Legal Services Authority, which has the mandate to provide legal services to the community. Then, of course, with health departments and women and child development functionaries as per requirement. So what I'm definitely not saying that the gender issue has been addressed by NRLM. Far from it. It's a very, very complex issue, and a lot more focus is required. A lot more needs to be done. But what I'm talking about is the potential that is there. And previous speakers also said that there is a potential, and there are things that you can do, because you have this whole institution of women and the strong institutions of women. So yeah, I'll stop here. Thank you.
After three outstanding academics and a very erudite practitioner who spent 12, 13 years in the Rural Livelihood Mission, there's little to say. And I'm keeping in mind that from the government side, some of our finest officers who've done some work on this are with us today. They will share how they saw the whole thing moving. Friends, we need to, I think the first point, as somebody who's done more than 4 decades in government, nothing happens in government by itself. So Ashwini, I'd like to point out, when you have a slide which says that empowerment happened by itself, it doesn't happen by itself. There are certain processes which contribute to it, but there is a manner in which you have to invest in those processes. 5,500 gender resource centers in 5,500 blocks. They'll have some impact somewhere. Again, in fact, my last week I was in Jharkhand.
You didn't say that empowerment happened by itself. I've never said that.
No, I'm just that it was not an intended outcome, is what you had mentioned in one of the slides. So
we'll talk about
okay.
We'll talk about
No, I'm just mentioning it because, I think some of these institutions have been built on a foundation of trying to think through, because imagine the limitation. Here is a government program which is trying social transformation. Almost an impossibility, or in many manners. Now, how do you tackle this? Now, it is in that context, the scale that it has reached, we need to understand where this is coming from. And while understanding where it is coming from, the numbers are huge. Some of these have been referred to earlier. I will not spend time on it. But just 1 minute on this little one. the community resource persons that we talk about, the digital public infrastructure and financial inclusion we talk about, if it was not for these women at the last mile providing services, it would not have been possible. To be in a situation where in 2015-16, when we began, with great difficulty, we got permission to work in one panchayat with a women from the SHG as a banking correspondent Sakhi. Today, more than 160,000 panchayat, which is about 60% of them, have a BC correspondent from among the SHGs providing this last mile service. How this contributes to change and transformation, I'll come to later. So I think one has to bear in mind 2015, when the program extension happens. See, as Neeta rightly mentioned, many of you mentioned, 2011 to 15, very much in the interest of the program, we followed a purist model where we said that women self-help groups are the purest, the best. They should not mix with panchayats. They should not engage in MGNREGS. They should not engage with the outer world. But they focused on building capacity among women during this phase, which was very, very required for the later expansion. 2014-15, by that time, a time had come where people were looking beyond community mobilization. What is that economic activity that we can go to? And as you rightly mentioned, between the AP model and the Panchayat SHG model, in some manner, as an afterthought, the 2015 cabinet note very categorically talked about PRI SHG partnership for the first time, which we had not engaged in the beginning. We had done very well with NRLM. A lot of that capacity building stood it in good stead later. But it was a purist model where we didn't want to mix around with panchayats, MGNREGS and others. So I think a lot of that change, how it brought scale, and in terms of the specific decisions, even the fact that it is a human resource dependent program, we were always struggling, will government allow us more than 6% management cost? It is the first time when a call was taken that block and below the block, it will not count to the 6% management cost. You have as many people as you want. You set up gender resource centers if you want, you do what you like. You can have more human resources at the model cluster level, which was always a challenge in explaining to a lot of economists why we need more human resource in the management of a program. The Gram Panchayat-led planning process, the vulnerability, VPRP planning which began, a lot of that started because of this PRI SHG partnership, which I've referred to here. The accountability to Panchayati Raj institutions as well, something which Kudumshri, and we learned from it, Kudumshri has been a partner in NRLM. Kudumshri at one time was working in 18 different states on decentralization for the NRLM as a national resource organization. Pradhan, we have Tamali from Pradhan here. A lot of the work that Pradhan does, the scale is achieved because of this partnership with the foot soldiers at the last mile. In that process, I think the key triggers for transformation, 2015, again, a very clear decision was taken. The socio-economic census, the 8.9 crore households who were reported deprived on any parameter, unless you cover them, unless you include them in the SHG program, the village cannot be considered as saturated. A lesson we learned from the evaluations of Andhra Pradesh. The bottom 15% got left out in many parts of Andhra in the SERP project because there was no instrument for the poorest. And today we have Bala Murugan with us, who's been a pioneer in developing the Samaveshi Antyodaya Yojana, which is a 2-year support of up to 2 lakhs to help the ultra poor come out of poverty. What is now referred to as the SAY program, those components were not there in the original period. The intensive participatory planning exercise is a starting point. I come to this because 2015, 2,500 of the poorest blocks, we said now that we have the data from deprivation from SECC, can civil society organizations go and work on scale with communities? I still remember at that time, MGNREGS and Livelihood Mission had to work together. And there were a few World Bank functionaries with due regard to them. They were reluctant to associate with this participatory process. Why with Narega, why with Panchayat and so on? Because that was the manner in which it had all been rolled out. So the range of community resource persons, which needed a lot of hand-holding and support, which needed partnerships with many organizations, not only Pradhan, with BAF, with many of them, the National Dairy Development Board and so on. So I think a lot of that partnership, Pashu Sakhi, all kinds of Sakhis who are helping out. Now the model for them, part of the payment comes from the interest which the cluster level federation or the VO gets out of the monies it has, the resources in perpetuity. Part of the payment is for the services which are offered. Likewise, for the first time when we are trying with enterprise, a concept of a community enterprise Sakhi, something where enterprise development and through the Entrepreneur Development Institute, EDI, a lot of these persons were trained to become CRP for enterprise promotion. Now, I think why it's important, many of these so-called professionals who are local, they really take the program to scale. If we could move up to, and I'll show you in some of the slides how the scale was achieved. We'll show in some of these. This is just on the deprivation data from the SECC. 8.85 crore reported some deprivation or the other. Unless we covered them, we can't call a village saturated. That is what the decision was. Southern states, and very rightly pointed out by you, in Kerala, in Tamil Nadu, the model is different from Andhra. And a lot of what I list here, 6 things which seem to have happened on scale, not so much in Karnataka and Andhra, but definitely in Tamil Nadu and Kerala. High adolescent girls' participation in higher secondary, higher education, decline in fertility, improvement in healthcare services, formation of women's collectives, livelihood diversification through skills, and bank linkage for SHGs. The interesting thing, this approach, where you focused on expansion to the poorer parts of the country, this is from the UNDP's multi-dimensional poverty data for 2015-16 to 19-21. The poorest of the states have made the most of the gains in absolute numbers in bringing out people out of multi-dimensional poverty. They had a larger problem, but this has been possible. Jivika, for example, we'll hear Balamurugan after this. He led the whole process in the livelihood mission in Bihar. How Jivika contributed to this. And as you rightly pointed out, scheduled caste and scheduled tribes as participants in the Jivika program in Bihar, it is more than the proportion of those communities in society, clearly showing that the program had a very strong pro-poor bias. Credit linkage, I'm not talking about the turn of a century, 2013-14, 86% of all lending was only in the four at that time southern Indian states. 86%, because that is where the movement began. That is where they had the capacities to be able to absorb credit. Look at 2026. West Bengal's total credit is far outstripping Telangana or Tamil Nadu. Bihar, equal some of those states. Orissa, having more credit per year than some of the states which had been doing it in the past. This is the change and where the foot soldiers mattered. The 13 lakh crore that Nita referred to, with less than 1.3, 1.4% NPAs, the states with the lowest NPAs were Bihar and West Bengal because they had something called a community-based recovery mechanism at the bank level. Every fortnight, the women go to the bank, manager says which are the accounts which are due. Those were paid back by the women. The women in turn ask, will you give us loan for XYZ? Now, this CBRM mechanism in Bihar and West Bengal, it was almost institutionalized. It didn't happen by itself, it had to be made to happen. Many of these structures I'm coming to because we still don't know enough about it. And clearly when it comes to the decentralization bit, Panchayats and SHG, PRI SHG framework, which is what Kudumshree's success is about, which is what Kerala's decentralization is greatly facilitated by, is a model that we adopted nationally that will follow that. Long way to go. The accountability framework, especially community validated data, this is the real challenge. Each time that we try to collect community validated data, we get a picture which is different from what often we get. The Mission Antyodaya was one effort in the rural development still going on, where in many places, the communities did not validate what was claimed. So I think clearly one of the challenges before us, how do we build in community validated data into systems for our the MIS and IT to be a little better. And last but not the least, yes, the women's collectives. Nitish Kumar in Bihar had to bring prohibition. I don't think it was an idea which came from him. The women made it very, very clear. If you want us to vote for us, we want prohibition in the state. I'm not going into the merits or demerits of it, but I'm only saying that the agency of women takes different forms. Yes, for sure, there is, in terms of even participation in a meeting, the husband's permission to participate in a meeting. A lot of those elements continue to create challenges for gender empowerment, create challenges for, getting free from the kinds of, relationship inequalities which continue. But what we find over time, and again, this is something which Anjini's study, both the studies had pointed out, it takes anywhere between 6 to 8 years for a women's collective to mature. It doesn't happen overnight, it takes a little time. And 6 to 8 years is what requires. So we'll have to have patience with some of the results for them to be able to make that change. I was going through Pradhan's annual presentation for the next week, and I find they have done now a very detailed study taking the same cohort year on year. What is happening to their incomes? And what they find in villages, they've engaged through self-help groups for the last 7, 8 years. They have managed to move up considerably in the one. For higher order economic activity, we will remain grounded in some of these lower level economic activity, which from that point of view, the entire movement looking forward needs to integrate human development more centrally to the women's collectives and gender empowerment. Because even from the NFHS 6 data, which we have analyzed for 3 categories of states which have done well, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Goa, Himachal Pradesh, Sikkim, the gender gaps in 10 years of schooling are less. The levels of stunting are lower than the national average. The aspiring states like Bihar, Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh, the historical legacies of an inequality of gender is there, and that shows in the gender gaps. But what is most paradoxical is some states with high per capita incomes like Telangana. Many of them do display very high gender gaps in 10 years of schooling, and therefore, even there on stunting, their positions are not commensurate with their economic activity. So we need to take note of the fact that unless we do something on education as well, especially the gender gaps in 10 years of schooling as a one marker, it really tells us which way we are headed. I stop here because we have two very distinguished friends who are here and will definitely take us more. Thank you so much.
Thank you, all our panelists. Can we please request D. Balamurugan, the ex-CEO of Jivika, to please share some of this? Yeah, please.
I don't have the PPT. I just going to share my experience of doing my work in Jivika, starting from 2016 to 23, almost 7 years. Particularly, I'll be talking about a program called Satat Jivikopajan Yojana. We call it as SJY, that translates to Sustainable Livelihood Program. Basically, sir, actually, thank you, sir, for giving this opportunity to talk about SJY. As many speakers mentioned about NRLM and then how it came into being. Actually, in Bihar, the Jivika program was started way back in 2006. In fact, I am from 2005 batch. As a probationer, in a block, I went to a school and see that program.
how I interacted, got an opportunity in 2006 when this program started in one of the village in district called Purnia uh, in a block. I went and saw that. And then from 2006, this program was conducted in a very, very meticulous way in Bihar. Thanks to good leadership I got from Arvind Kumar Chaudhary sir as a CEO. And then, of course, as sir mentioned about, it got political leadership from then Chief Minister Nitish Kumar. Then this was being conducted, and then I'm just straight away. Then it paved a way for NRLM because we borrowed from Andhra and also took help from Andhra to do Jivika program in Bihar, and then it was doing very well. We started it in 5 districts. Purnia, I'll not go into the details. And then 2011 NRLM came. So NRLM also started implemented by Jivika started implementing NRLM also. And then fast forward to 2016, as sir mentioned, the popular demand from SHG members led to prohibition in Bihar. Then 2016, when total prohibition was implemented, one thing happened actually. The Pasi community in Bihar, they normally do toddy tapping. So that's the allowed livelihood activity. That is the only thing they know for centuries, for generations. When a state declaring toddy making as an illegal activity, state had a responsibility to provide alternative livelihood. Then we were told, because we were called and then told to design a program to help those families who are getting affected by this. Meanwhile, we were also doing some process monitoring because we were implementing this SHG program. One of the tasks is, in the SHG program, as sir said, actually, it's absolutely spot on that poorest the poor has to be included in SHG program. The mobilization exercise used to start from the poorest of the tola in a village, and then almost more than 95% of the eligible SC/ST family were already included in the SHG. Then when we were understanding impact of this particular program, SHG program, original Jivika program on poverty alleviation and gender empowerment, we were finding it's a general and anecdotal also it is easy. Some of the poorest of the families from poor tolas are not moving up in the ladder. They are part of the SHG, but they are not moving up the ladder. What to be done? Actually, we did I still remember there are 400 households, poorest of the poor households were consulted, and then we did the survey, and then that survey was also happening. Meanwhile, this prohibition happened, and then we were asked to do a program. In between, we also try and understand that problem. We did a pilot in 2 blocks, Pasoi and Sukpi in Kagadia and Sitamarhi, I still remember, to try and test graduation model. That graduation model, most of you know about it, is giving livelihood asset to a particular family and then giving them coaching support. Actually, there should be a person to go and visit that household once in a week or once in 15 days to continuously monitor and support. I would not say monitor, is basically to support them, facilitate them. That coaching and asset, the 2 components are very important. In SHG program, you don't have a concept of grant. So grant is not at all, it's absolutely no in a general SHG program. It is always grant is given to the group only, not to the individual SHG member. So we wanted to do this graduation program. So we were doing this pilot. Then it took 2 years for us to understand and then come out with this SJY in 2018. So we use this opportunity to not only to provide livelihood opportunities for those people who are affected by state declaring toddy making as an illegal activity. We use this opportunity to come out with a program to basically help poorest of the poor from the community who are already part of SHG. Even some of them are not part of SHG also. So this program was launched in 2018, and then in August 5th, I remember 5th August, I think madam, you also came to the program. Nita madam was invited, she was a witness. Honorable Chief Minister distributed first lot of kids to the SHGY beneficiaries. What is the difference actually? What are the important elements of that SHGY program? How it became successful? This graduation program was being done by many NGOs in part of the country, which Jharkhand, Orissa, West Bengal, Bandhan Kunhar was doing it as an NGO from based in West Bengal. They were doing this program, but not at scale. They used to help 2,000 families, 3,000 families, 5,000 families with grant and then this coaching support. The first time state government came out with a program to support 1 lakh families, we got a budget of around 840 crore rupees. That program had an element of 60,000 rupees maximum asset support one family can get. That is the basic foundational principle which was provided in the approval, and then rest was left to us. Actually, that is also one of the major factor which helped us to have that flexibility. Then we started formulating guidelines based on, because SJY's Jivika program, this SHG platform was already available. Then we used that platform to do that program. And then the first time the grant element was built in this SHG program. I would not say in the SHG program, because SHG platform was used to implement. That was a state government program, Sadat Jivikopajan Yojana. It's a separate program. And then we started doing that. What are the important things we have done is, we gave actually as in SHG, normal SHG program, primacy to the community. This is completely owned by the community, starting from identification of who is the poorest of the poor among the in the village. That selection was completely left to the community, and then selection of master resource person. Every 20 to 30 families were supported by master resource person. That selection was left to the community, and then the families were supported by these community leaders by visiting the family and then handholding them and making part of SHG, and then the entire support and then entire decision making is given to community. That is one of the basic important aspect of SJY. And then we created a separate team. Actually, if this kind of program is going to be given to normal existing manpower, that we have already existing district level team, block level team, and then everyone. So what we have done, we created a separate vertical, and then we selected for each block. Actually, we didn't do it again entire state at one time. We selected, as Madam said, resource. You have to do it in phased manner. So we have selected few blocks based on the SEC data, and then we started doing in phased manner. We selected SJY YP. So we have a young professional program. So wherein we had more than 200 YPs working at any point in time. So we selected YPs, and then the selection was also done in a very careful manner, in a calibrated manner. We conducted interview, and then we have taken them. And then there was a condition also. If you are going to join this program, you have to at least give 2 years. You are always free to go at any time. You can go out, but for this particular program, you have to give 2 years of your time. So this kind of, and then we had Bandhan Kunhar, they also supported us, and then we had JPAL, and then this, because this SHG program in NRLM framework also, the importance was given to partners. You can't do it alone. So we had very good partners in the form of JPAL supporting us for the evaluation, and then we had NRM program already existing, and then we had World Bank program, we had state government program supporting us. On top of it, we had very good team from Bandhan Kunhar. So these people came together. We also got a support from Co-Impact. There's one again donor agency. We created a separate structure, and then we created a strong MIS, and we built in all these things to implement this program. One of the most important element, again, we had a lot of flexibility. It was extremely flexible program. As I said, we were given, okay, you can give 60,000 to a family. That was a broader guideline given to us. And then how much to be given, and at what time everything was. Initial guideline, what we did, we said each family will be supported 1,000 rupees on this election per month for 7 months. And then the first assistant in the form of a grant will go after this family prepares a micro plan with the help of a village organization. That was the initial program. When we are implementing in 2018, again COVID came, we found that this preparation of micro plan was taking almost 3 months, 4 months. They were already into the program. They were getting training, capacity building was happening, convergence, through convergence, they are getting other benefits, but we are not able to give grant. The first grant, it is taking 2 to 3 months. Then we have taken a decision, okay, we call it as a special grant. While they get selected by the community, once they become part of SJY, 10,000 rupees, we decided to give 10,000 rupees as a first grant without asking anything. So that 10,000 was given. So actually that helped in a great way because they got immediate support and then started doing, some activity. The other aspect, I said, the coaching, that was the most important aspect in this entire program, apart from, because there are so many government programs which provides grant to poor families. But what was missing is the continuous support, continuous facilitation. That's where this MRP, we call it as coaching. These master resource persons were selected among community resource persons of the SHG program. So they were selected and then they were trained and then they have to visit each family once in a week. Again, that is a program design. But when we started implementing, after getting feedback, we used to have continuous loop of feedback from community as well as from officers, young professionals, our supporting our organization. So this one, actually, we again relaxed. So we left it to MRP. You have to also have a trust. We left it to MRP. You are dealing with this family, 20 family. You know very well than me which family need a visit once in a week or once in 15 days. You decide it. So that also left to the MRP. So MRP can even speak to a family and then you can decide, okay, whether he has to visit once in 15 days or once in 30 days. If you are going to be inflexible, each MRP has to visit every 20 family once in a week, that has to come in MIS, then only they can get payment. So actually sometimes we end up creating those kind of hurdles. And sometimes we become very inflexible. That leads to problem. Actually, this kind of small things, allowing MRP to decide which family has to be visited once in a week or once in 15 days or once in a month or twice a week. That is also. You may need to visit a family twice a week also. That flexibility also was given. And then as I said, this was rigorously monitored before, going to other aspects. One more important thing for this kind of program is your trust in and then your belief that this kind of interventions can work. If you are not having any trust, if you are not even having any belief that this kind of a program can be done and then the community is having capability to deliver, then whatever maybe you'll be doing, that will not achieve results. Fortunately, I had a very good team. They had this belief and then trust, and then they were already doing 10 years of SHG program, and that's the reason we could able to do it successfully. We got support for 1 lakh families initially. 60,000 was the outer limit for grant, and then we could able to spend around 35 to 40,000 initially within first 4 or 5 years, and then select 1,60,000 families, and then the results were shown. Spectacular indication that it is going in a very good manner, that led to program SAY. So this Samavishi Ajivika Yojana, that Jivika program led to Ajivika program, that SJY program led to SAY. I'm very happy to mention here about this because in Bihar, the Jivika program starting from 2016, it's almost 20 years, is being done in a very, very systematic, in a sincere manner. And then fortunately, this program got good leaders. My predecessor, Arvind Kumar Chaudhary, sir, this is also very important to mention. This kind of program need leadership for longer duration. He worked as CEO Jivika for 7 long years. I got an opportunities by, such a lucky opportunity that I got opportunity to work for 6 long years. So that's the kind of program because that needs longer duration of leadership. And then one more thing about this program is strong convergence. Very, very important. Convergence in this kind of a program. We ensure that, for example, they are eligible to get lot of things. They are eligible to get toilet, household, food security, and then they are also included under financial inclusion. But their ability to operate and then get access is limited because these families are having this problem for generations. And one of the most important, again, aspect, apart from they are having low asset base, their income is very less, and then they don't have any, their mobility is very, very less. But other important element is their confidence and motivation levels are very, very low. That behavioral aspect is also very important to understand about in this kind of a program. So this was also studied, and then we spend a lot of time creating material. Well, because the training has to be given. Apart from training for enterprise development, this part of the program also, this part of the understanding and then nuanced approach is also very important. That actually helped a lot. That actually helped us to help them to access all those assets. Convergence, when I say, not only with government programs, as I mentioned, food security program, housing, toilet, but the convergence within Jivika, because convergence is very easy to say, but the most toughest part is convergence. Within Jivika, there are so many other verticals doing, for skilling program, and then as Sir said, 1 minute, Bank Shaki. So we started, telling Jivika within other verticals, eligible SJY family should be included. So that is also very important. And the last one is, apart from primacy to community and then being flexible, one more important thing is having a good team and then cutting the layers. Sometimes we become very very formal. The feedback has to come through all those layers from, if YP has to give its message or suggestion, it has to come through BPM and then DPM and then there is the SPM and then it lost in between. So cut the layers, have direct connect and speak to them, get the feedback and use that to make changes, and then this program can do well. And at the end, sir, this program is doing very well. When we started, it is around 2,700 rupees, the basic monthly income. The study shows it went up to 14,000 rupees. Right now, 1,20,000 families graduated and 2 lakh families are selected. So thank you so much for these opportunities.
Maybe please have Anil Kumar, Special Secretary in Development.
A very good afternoon. After 3 researchers, 3 practitioners, I have very little to kind of present before you. I don't have a presentation. I'll be very brief. So the Deen Dayal Antyodaya Yojana, as you're all aware, started in 2011, 15 years now. It's been a fantastic journey. Close to over 10 crore women have been mobilized, 92 lakh self-help groups have been formed, over 5 lakh village organizations, 34,000 cluster level federations. So the initial phase, I think I missed out the first 2 speakers, but got a glimpse of what Nita ji was also mentioning. The initial phase, I think the focus was more on mobilization, the shift from the subsidy-driven approach to providing capacity to women. That was the focus. So we've achieved quite a bit in the last 15 years or so. So with a capitalization support of around 65,000 crores, you've been able to tap into nearly 13 lakh crore worth of bank loans from private and public banks. This is nearly 20 times the leveraging of funds that has happened. So every time if you see the graph which says that 99% expenditure has happened. So I keep reminding them that each rupee lost is 20 rupees of value that is lost at the field. The last presentation we had with the states where we had ministers, this came as a shock to them that this is the kind of money, because there are bigger states like Uttar Pradesh who have not been able to utilize that kind of money. But the leveraging is a very important element. And of course, this comes with a very small NPA, 1.78%, because the way the mission is worked around savings and having good bookkeeping at the lowest level. There has been a skilling component to it. We have the RCT, which is a very stable part of the picture, and close to 630 odd RCTs are functional, and they provide training, and they provide a huge amount of support to the SRLM setup and the NRLM. There is, of course, the Deen Dayal Upadhyay Gramin Kaushal Yojana, which has trained close to 18 lakh rural poor. But there were issues with the implementation of the program. It is now being revamped. And going forward, I think we are proposing that a similar kind of a kitty is provided, because it's very critical. Skilling, as Sir mentioned, is very critical to the whole scheme of things. So as far as gender is concerned, I think the focus on gender probably came after 15, 16. And I think on the ground, it started in 2019 onwards. 2019 to 24, I think, is where actually it picked up pace. The first focus, of course, was gender mainstreaming, ensuring that every aspect of the mission had the gender component. People were made aware that gender, of course, mattered. And what has evolved is, of course, the whole structure of over 5,000 gender resource centers across 22 states. And there are gender point persons at the SHG level. There are forums at the village organization and the cluster level federations. And the GRCs at the block level. There are, of course, states where there's a competition between the women and child department and the NRLM setup, because they feel that it's a competing kind of a organization. But nevertheless, it is a source for women who are in distress, and it provides a good platform for women. And one of the finest examples that I have seen is in Kerala, where the Snehita centers, if one goes to, the way the books are maintained, way anonymity is maintained, and women feel so comfortable rather than walking into a police station, and they would rather get into a GRC and talk to somebody whom they know, who may be a neighbor close by. So that's been a wonderful thing. Another has been the Nai Chetna awareness campaign. The gender violence, as you're all aware, that it's a very important aspect that has to be dealt with. So from 2022, now we have covered nearly 4 years of the Nai Chetna campaign, which runs close to 2 to 3 months every year. And 12 ministries have now joined with this whole campaign, which is a very good thing, and that kind of support that comes from all the ministries. So as a result of all this, of course, much has been spoken about it, that one is confidence building. Really, I mean, Dr. Kochar's report and several other reports have highlighted that it's not just savings that has happened, but confidence among women has increased. So 58%, one study reveals that confidence in women was increased. In awareness about addressing social issues, nearly 57% of the women said they are willing to go out and address social issues. Majority, around 54%, were indicated involvement in mobilizing vulnerable and poor women. So that's a very proactive approach that has been adopted, and that has been a result of the activities of the mission has taken. In the 3I assessment impact study also talks about nearly 60% women feel that they can now share incidences of violence in their group, and they feel CLFs and GRCs are equipped to provide all the support. So you have created an ecosystem where women feel comfortable and are able to talk about it, and they kind of find solutions. The community finds a solution to the problems that are being done. Another important element has been the participation in Panchayati Raj. So you have a lot of these self-help group women who would not have come out of their houses, but now are actually members, they are Panchayat presidents. And if you go to the southern states, you will, of course, in Kerala, you would find MLAs and ministers who were a part of the campaign and were part of the mission, which is a fascinating thing. Sir did mention about the Village Prosperity and Resilience Program. This is something that it is the core of convergence of NRLM, where we try to, because the panchayat is the biggest player in the village, and to converge with the panchayats is very essential. And nearly 57% of the gram panchayats have BPRP plans. And going forward, I think we intend to ensure that 100% of these plans are presented before the panchayat so that they become a part of the DP. I will just mention a couple of points on the way forward, because 2-3 issues we've been discussing about what all we have achieved. As it is mentioned, the glass is half full. There are a lot of achievements that have happened, but there's still a long way to go. We need to kind of address. And one of the points I take away from this meeting is time, because these things don't happen in a jiffy. I mean, you need to give time, you need to nurture things. 6 to 7 years is a very small thing, because when you go for a budget discussion, the first thing they ask you is, it's been 15 years, you're supposed to be a mission. What is the exit policy for this? How do you get out? So that perspective one has to give, that a lot of nurturing is required. We probably haven't covered all the cluster level federations. A fraction of the cluster level federations are really strong. So 2-3 very strong issues. I've been here for a very short period, 1.5 years. So 2-3 challenges that I face is one is of staffing. I mean, this is a capacity building program. I mean, the core of NRLM is capacity building. Without staffing, you cannot do work. And typically, in our arms are basically the state rural livelihood mission, and rural livelihood missions, if not led by people for a long tenure, things don't actually take up. So of late, we have been seeing many states where the turnover is so high that in my own state, the Karnataka cadre that I belong to, we have 3 SMDs over a period of 1 year. So if you somebody is sitting here for 4 months, it's a very complex program. To understand itself, it takes around 6 to 8 months, the nuances of the program. So that is a big challenge. And second aspect of this staffing issue has been the understanding that what Neetaji presented about the professional support. The professional support is actually professional support. People who have knowledge on farm, non-farm, financial inclusion, capacity building, who are able to work with people in the field. So that understanding is also kind of lost in some states, where people feel that the old BDO can double hat as everybody in the mission. So that's something that we are trying. So this is a big challenge that, and in every meeting we kind of put it in the front, saying these are the vacancies that you have. Without people in the field at the block level, it's very difficult to do the work. And another challenge has been of the CRPs. We have around 9 lakh community resource person. One of the most fascinating parts of the mission, because it creates an ecosystem at the village level. If you look at any department, the department ends at the block level. The block level will have an assistant director and probably 1 or 2 people who has to fend for the entire program in the entire block. But in this mission, you have a ecosystem of community resource persons. There's a Pashu Sakhi, a Krishi Sakhi, CRP, EP who's there. And who is the person? Who is the next door neighbor? It could be from the next village, people whom people are very comfortable talking to. So that ecosystem that has been created is the most fascinating part. But the challenge now is to rationalize, because 9 lakh is a very large number. Probably we need some larger numbers in some activity or the other, but we need to kind of rationalize and ensure that their payments are taken care of. So that's a big challenge. And one of the issues that was raised in the Niti Aayog report as well, that we need to rationalize the usage of the community resource person, ensure that they get paid timely. And so those are the few challenges that we were looking at when we had this discussion. And going forward, what is the plan? So it is still under discussion. It has still not been approved. So broadly speaking, we are looking at the financial inclusion is, of course, the central piece of the entire mission. As Sir mentioned, there has been a shift in the sense the southern states used to take a large portion of the credit linkage. That shift has happened. But again, if you look at the details of the credit linkage that has happened, so average credit to SHG is around 3.55 lakhs. But then you look at UP, you look at even Bihar, you look at Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, it's in the range of 1 lakh. So 1,15,000. So essentially, one Didi gets around 10,000 rupees from a credit linkage, which is very small. So the focus now has been that we need to pull these states out from such low credit linkage. We need to increase the credit linkage. So whatever we achieved in the last 15 years, we plan to do that in the next 5 years. So 10 to 11 lakh crore of credit linkage is what we aspire to do. And of course, interest subvention is a major tool that we use to kind of nudge the banks to give it. The banks are, of course, comfortable, but there are issues in the field of outreach, especially in the hilly area. So there's a plan to give them further kind of incentives to do better there. The second aspect, of course, is the shift to enterprise development. So this is again a layering that has happened with NRETP, the SVP program that started in 17-18. So the fascinating part of that program is that these are women who are barely 7th, 8th pass, are able to run an enterprise. It could be a shop, it could of course be a manufacturing unit as well, but the studies reveal that 70 to 80% of these units, even after 3 years, are functional and are profitable. So you can imagine the kind of efforts the CRPEPs or the Block Resource Center would have put in so as to make somebody who's semi-literate into an entrepreneur. So this shift of when you talk about the Lakpati Didi, the 3 crore Lakpati Didis that have already been enabled, and another 3 crores target has been given. So enterprise is something that would become central in the discussion going forward. So we are looking at individual loans now. There is an SHG credit linkage that's already happening, which is good, but it has to be strengthened and deepened. The individual credit linkage is something which is not happening. I mean, the numbers are very small. So we have an annual target of close to around 13,000 crores. We achieve around 8,000 crores. So we are targeting nearly 1 lakh crores over the next five years. So 20,000 crores every year is something that we are targeting. We hope to touch around 1 crore women moving forward. Then, of course, there is a Startup Village Enterprise Program, which is a very focused, intensive, well organized. We need to revisit it and make it sharper, and how we can use the 6 crore that is given to the block in a better fashion. We have reached out through the annual action plan to around 87 lakh enterprises, women SHG members who are running enterprises. We intend to touch it, push it beyond 1 crore, and ensure that kind of support is provided by the mission. There is also the aspect, as Balamurgan mentioned, the Samaveshi Ajivika Yojana is the new program. This was rolled out as an innovation project in the last Finance Commission cycle. And we have seen rich results in 11 states. And there is a felt need that there is a section of the community which, although are provided with the benefits, are not able to engage into the SHG fold, and they need a special assistance. So we intend to roll out that in this Finance Commission cycle. But all this rests on the structure. So the structure is the most important element of the whole game, and we need to be aware of that. So we've rolled out the model cluster level federation scheme, where we want to ensure that they work as an independent entity. We work in a professional manner, ensure that they have the requisite staff. So we have rolled out around 10,189 or cluster level federations as model CLFs. We intend to scale that up to 20,000. So this is going to be the biggest challenge, because if you are talking about 6 crore Lakpati Didis and ensuring that many of them become entrepreneurs, the cluster level for the federation is the pivot on which all these activities hinge on, and we need to professionalize them. So there is a viability gap funding of 20 lakh that is provided. So the cluster level federation and strengthening is of course would be the central piece of the program going forward. But there would also be the nuts and bolts, which we need to, because as the program becomes older, we get set in our ways, and we need to kind of ensure that the meetings also take place in a regular fashion. Elite capture does not happen. So those are all routine things which we need to kind of do it. And hopefully, given that we now have LocoS, which is end-to-end online system which tracks the entire mission, we will be in a position to kind of strengthen it and ensure that these things happen. I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all for such a rich and fascinating discussion. Actually, we'll open the floor to questions. Yes, you may raise your hands and please introduce yourselves to those who may not know you. And yeah, I think the first question is from one
Thank you. Sorry, can I be heard? Yes. Thanks a lot. That was very fascinating. And I mean, I learned quite a lot. This is not an area that I've been working on recently. But I want to ask a sort of disruptive question. One of the problems with any government program is that any description of it can become quite impressive if you simply describe it spreading out. We had so many of these things, now we have so many more, next year we'll have so many more. I mean, since you talked about some evaluations, and I think I even mentioned, JPAL mentioned somewhere, now those guys subject these things to a very rigorous form of determining a criterion on the basis of which you can say whether the thing has succeeded or not. I mean, it's never therefore a success that so many more women have been covered. Question is what actually got done. Now, I noticed that Anjini has raised this non-measurable dimension of it has increased their confidence. And that is also important. But forgetting the confidence business, if the name of the game is income, what are the evaluations that have said that the response in terms of income generated or the money that was devoted is good, bad, indifferent, very good, or whatever? Are there some?
We may take 2 or 3 questions, collect them, and then have the panelists answer. Before that, can I just request all the panelists to put on the mics? Just so you're audible. Yeah, that's perfect. That's exactly. Okay. We have another question.
Actually, I have perhaps a clarificatory question again addressed to Anjini, Kochar. You sort of make a distinction between these MCLF and the NRETP. And I'm just wondering I mean, it's in some senses, they're conceptually different path. I mean, the CLF is an institutional structure that was part of, but the NRETP is the program, it's the employment transition program. So on what basis are you kind of comparing them? Because I would imagine that they're actually linked. And, when you say that the NRETP was maybe not as effective as the MCLF, but I mean, I'm a little confused in what that really means. And maybe it links to Dr. Alovalia's question in terms of the CLF was maybe able to provide more social gains on in your regressive norms thing and not that many economic gains, which is perhaps the ETP's focus. So was there a disjunction between the aims within the program, I mean, between the social gains and the economic gains and maybe different institutional provisioning was there or not there or needed to be there? Just.
Okay, let's take one more. Yeah.
I have a couple of questions, not directly on NRLM itself, but on the larger issue of economic empowerment and women and locating NRLM within that. I think like all of you presented, and it's quite obvious from the field that huge gains made because of these women's groups. Now that most women are in a group and the visibility that women have got, there is a public life and many benefits that come with it. But this whole question of economic empowerment and livelihood, I think from both what Anjini presented as well as Ashwini, that whatever the data that's available doesn't really show that really changing. As a larger question, that can we accept somewhere that entrepreneurship itself probably is not the strategy, and when it comes to this, we have to think about wage employment, and probably NRLM is not the platform, but that is the kind of larger elephant in the room. A second question is more also curiosity, because post 22 particularly, we are seeing these increasing instances. There's a lot of small field studies which are showing it, RBI did as well. So is there some mechanism through the NRLM system, that we can kind of assess this double burden of debt, maybe somewhere where the NRLM credit, of course, is seen as easier terms, which it is, and more fair probably, but at the same time that people are taking consumption loans from other sources at much higher interest, and there's some reports of one loan being taken to pay off the other. And how do we address this in the context of the PDB and all the other goals that one?
I'll let any of the panelists that want to start take it, but can I just add in a framing question perhaps that's just helpful, is also maybe if we can think of how we measure things like confidence as well, and if that can be kind of weaved into the answers, that would be really helpful.
I'll start with Montek's question first. Start with the Montek's question on income, because that is at the heart, that you want to raise income. The study we did, and this is actually the very difficult part of the study, we were criticized very soundly for the length of our questionnaires. But if you're going to collect data on income, you really need that length of questionnaire. You can't just go in there and say, here, these 5 brackets, tell me which house. And if you're trying to do something about why is your income low, or what can you do about it? My hunch is that is why people don't look at income. We did, and we came up with estimates of it and the impact on that. But my hunch for why people don't do that is, I cannot even begin to tell you how much we were screamed at for this length of questionnaire. It was right, the criticism was correct, but you do have this other part. If you want to learn about income, how do you do it? So that's one issue. The second, I'm just going to talk about randomized studies. I don't want to talk about JPAL in particular. But there's some programs they're very well suited to, and we can learn a lot from them. These kind of programs are not that, because there was a clear recognition within NRLM that this is a 15-year journey. How are you going to evaluate that through a randomization? So going back again to income gain, the program was very clear that we won't get income gains for quite some time until we built these CLFs. So then if a study goes in there, and actually this was a study on Jivika, if they say that after 2 years there were no income gains, you got to look at them and say, but no one expected income gains. So for you to tell me that doesn't work. You are looking at a different strategy. I think these programs are what is needed. But along with this new strategy coming in, and maybe this speaks to your point as well, we need to be thinking differently about evaluation and the research that goes on it. I actually think we need to step away from evaluation and just say we're going to think about research that can make these programs more effective. And how do we partner with you in doing that? So that's one thing. I just want to answer that and then turn it over. I should have explained this as rushing because it's a 15-minute presentation. NRETP was, so I said there's these layerings. So we started off with self-help groups, et cetera, et cetera. They started in the early blocks. So there are some blocks that were initiated in 2011 and others joined at different phases. On the early blocks, a component of them got this National Rural Economic Transformation Project, which is a World Bank project, implemented in, say, 400, each district identified so many. NRETP has lots of subcomponents, and MCLF is a subcomponent. The Model CLF program is a subcomponent of NRETP, which means that in every NRETP is a block level program. In every NRETP block, on average, 1 CLF was taken to be this Model CLF program. So the program was put in place in only a quarter of the NRETP blocks. And so I sort of speak naturally of, oh, here's NRETP and here's MCLF, because we separately looked at what's happening in these MCLF clusters and compared them to the NRETP clusters, and that was it.
Yeah, so Montek, in response to your question, you're absolutely right that the income gains from the program, from whatever studies there are, have been few and uneven. And so if that's the main objective of the program, we have a long way to go. And that kind of links also to what Deepa was asking about whether rural entrepreneurship by women can be the chief instrument to raise incomes of families and thereby mitigate rural, lower rural poverty. That's a big picture question. So while NRLM and its precursor SGSY, then NRLM, then the various versions, they kind of merge into each other. Overall, it's a program of long duration. It's not a 5-year, 10-year. It's sort of in some version or the other. It's been there for 30 years, and it's increasing in terms of its scope and its breadth. And evaluations are becoming more difficult precisely because of that. Because once you add more objectives to the program, then it's not clear what constitutes a success. So if SHG women get ration cards for the women in the village, is that a success of the SHG program, or is that a last mile delivery, right? And so what's happening now is, at least that's what I find in my paper, is that so many objectives are getting tacked on to the NRLM, what I'm calling NRLM. I mean, I know there is many different names. Is that then you can look at one of those things and say, oh, this really worked well, and lose sight of the central thing, which is the income and livelihoods component. So that's a short answer.
Can I just,
yeah.
I mean, if the concern is gender, and I mean, that's a legitimate concern, and the issue is entrepreneurship, shouldn't you start at the top? I mean, there are lots and lots of rural women much higher up in the income ladder who are not getting a chance to becoming entrepreneurs. So aren't you making a mistake by combining and confusing that with the anti-poverty?
But the whole idea is anti-poverty, right? So you're targeting the most poor. That's the stated aim of the program. So it's not even just people who are below the poverty line by official records. It's participatory identification of the poor. So the community decides who the poorest are.
Okay.
So that's the way the program is. That's the way the program is developed. I mean, since I'm not an architect, I'm not going to speak. But let me just give me 1 minute to respond to Deepa's question, which is that I have another paper in which I've looked at the expansion of NRLM, the SHGs, and labor force data, going back to the EUS and then following it up with PLFS. So what you find is that districts in which SHG membership is higher is associated with higher female labor force participation, but it's because the shift is from casual labor to self-employment. It really has no effect on wage employment. And I think so the question that you ask is very important. And it also is linked to, what I said before, which is, are we going to think of rural poverty being eliminated by the poorest women becoming entrepreneurs by, 10,000 rupees a month or whatever that is? I mean, it's a good, I'm not dismissing the amount, but is that the kind of catalyst that will actually spur entrepreneurship? And that links to Pramod's big picture question as well. So I'll leave it there.
Dr. Singh? Yeah.
So Montague's questions first, because I'd like to bring additional dimension into it. Is it audible?
Yes.
Okay. So after all, it's a livelihood program. It's not an income generation program. When we say livelihood, it's beyond income. Income is just one part. There has to be asset generation that has to happen. The human asset or social asset which is getting built, that is one of the outcomes. Then one has to also ask whether their voice is increasing. That's happening. And also the risk, because their risk to going back into the poverty trap, whether if we are able to, they are able to traverse that journey forward. That's again a kind of gains. So let us not consider this as a income generation program. It's a livelihood program. Another aspect is, if we do this program, a policy question is that your MG Narega, today GRAMG programs, that you don't need to spend so much because it's a quality program. There you are going to build their capacity. And some of the experimentation, which I talked about before you came, the SLAG program, which is Sustainable Livelihood in the climate change era. So the kind of options they have been, the kind of activities they started, which are largely on cropping and animal husbandry related activities, based on the climate information services they are provided. If those are also tied together, the impacts are going to be, I think, far more greater.
Yeah.
So just 2 or 3 small points on this, partly clarified by Pramod. But more importantly, in terms of the time it takes, I think it's an important factor which I'd like to come back to every time, because every evaluation, whether it is Pramod's evaluations, whether it is Anjini's evaluations, they have all been pointing out this 6 to 8 year thing. Now, what is happening? One, clearly on education and skills, unless the gains in education and skills are very high, we will not make that kind of a change. Two, it is not a program only for the ultra poor. That is not the case. When it's said that it will take up every deprived household, if I live in a kacha room, then also I'm deprived. 1 in 2 rural households is deprived. That is not the chronic poverty rate. So the program actually covers 1 in 2 rural households. Out of 20 crore households, the effort was to cover 10 crore households. Anil mentioned the Startup Village Entrepreneurship Program, SVEP. Why did it succeed? This has been evaluated, studied repeatedly. It allowed, well, many things. One, it was an end-to-end solution to some forms of enterprise. You provided knowledge support, you provided market linkage, you provided a community resource person for enterprise. Most importantly, it did not depend only on a bank loan. It depended on what is called an enterprise fund, which the communities manage. 30% of the lending happened from the community enterprise fund. And we found in the studies that wherever a community enterprise fund is a part of the loan, the repayments are much better because they feel accountable. If it's only a bank loan, they may run away with it. On the issue of labor force participation rate, I have looked at it for those 17, 18 to 24, 25 period. Yes, it has happened at the lower wage end. MG, NREGS, for example, because the wage rates were much lower than market wages. Men went for the market wage, women did the Narega work. The percentage of women as a proportion of total wage labor in Narega went up over the years. And during these years, in particular, the COVID years, when additional allocations were made available, a lot of that showed up as wages to women. The loan of 11 lakh crores that were talked about, they may not be making profits. They may not be making higher incomes. But the fact that they started an enterprise, automatically we do count them in this. Third is the issue of animal resources and their management. Over the last 15, 20 years, clearly the not so much horticulture and animal resources, and in both of them. So I think a formal recognition of the women as a wage laborer in agriculture, because I think even if you look at the numbers and the fact that agriculture labor numbers went up, which is not a good sign. But within that, the percentage of women in agriculture wage labor has gone up far more than the others. So I think your point is a very valid one, that none of these give us the confidence that this is the way to break the poverty cycle. So just one example I'd like to mention here. Pradhan's, one of the leaders is here. Pradhan has done a 42,000 household cohort study where they have worked for some years. They have focused on multiple livelihoods, some fishing, some horticulture, some non-farm activity, and so on. And there, what they record is that if the bulk of the households were in the bottom quartile, today the situation is that the bottom quartile is now the smallest of the 4. But that has taken them 10 to 12 years in many places. So I think what this cohort study is indicating, that interventions need to be sustained for a much longer period, because the kind of situations that you're taking them out from. So it is not a program only for the ultra poor. That clarity is needed. Any household reporting any form of deprivation has to be covered. Yeah, thank you.
Neeta, did nothing? Okay. I had someone here who wanted to have a mic.
I thought I'll just add to the answer on income increase. And actually, Dr. Kochar, you should add, because the 3IE study found that there was a 19% increase in incomes from the savings and credit, like simple savings and credit program of NRLM. And then once you start layering on the livelihoods related activities, that and the model cluster level federations, that led to almost a 30% increase in incomes. with the caveat, of course, that these are long-term programs. So over 7 years, if I'm not mistaken, right? And on the JPAL evaluation of the ultra-poor graduation, again, over 7 years, we saw a 5x increase in incomes. But that is for the ultra-poor, the poorest of poor families. So I think there are small studies which are done on the income increase. Again, the caveat around the amount of time that it takes to get to that type of effect. I think that's really valuable. And I think the next phase of this work is also to say, what is the individual's income increase? Because all of this is actually measuring household income increase. And then this question of gender then becomes even more important. Like where, I think Ashwini mentioned that a lot of the loans are actually going to the men who are already running an enterprise. And maybe that's valuable if you're thinking about poverty, alleviation for a household. But once the gender element comes in, we need to think about it slightly differently.
Thank you. We have a question here and then 2 there. So we'll take these 3. Should we start here? Thank you. Oh, and we have Dr. Mohan. Let me take you in the next round.
So it's not basically a question. So I'm just sharing some of my experience. So I feel
Charanjit was the mission director for NRLM for many years.
So poverty is a very complex thing. So there may be many reasons for the poverty. I will just give you some context. In Bihar, there are Mahadalits are there. So 96% of them don't own any land. So that is a big difficulty. And education or literacy level is hardly 9.8%. So they are suffering from the education also. Then there are health issues are there. Then there are transgender people are there in the country. So there are many types of deprivation. There are some geographical areas are like that it's difficult to reach there. So I just wanted to share that Karnataka has done very wonderful thing. Like somebody was saying that the leadership is also very important. There the leadership has been taken by one ACS is there, Madam Uma Mahadevan. She was really doing wonderful work. She has delineated this 14 types of certificates or entitlements which should be given to everybody. This may be income certificate, disability certificate, Aadhaar card is there. So like that 14 have been charted out that which need to be given to everybody. And second thing, they have made this GPLC, Gram Panchayat Level Committee. 14 departments sit together at the village level. So that is a very important thing. So the convergence doesn't take place at the state level, it's taking place at the village level. So I think the institution which we create, that make it better. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have 2 questions there, I believe. We'll just get you the mic.
Thanks so much. Lovely presentations. And I'm from Educate Girls, and we work on education for 15 to 29 years old women and men as well, but women primarily. And 15 to 29 happens to be youth of the country. India right now is peaking at its youth population till 2033, and we'll start then declining on our youth population. While we were focusing on 15 to 29 women in the country who have not completed their 10th and 12th and should complete their education, we ended up working with livelihood missions of Assam and Telangana to begin with. And in these 2 states, we were told that, we actually portrayed this picture that we want to work with 15 to 29 years old women who are at the last mile, do not have opportunities. Would they want to do their 10, 12 through non-formal, ways, open school and other mechanisms? And we were said, we didn't apply this youth lens to SHG so far. We look at SHG members as SHG members. We don't really see them as under 30 years old. And could there be more that could be done with them? Especially Amarjit sir, when he spoke about education and skilling. Under 30 are the target group of India for many other programs also for education and skilling. And we were then given a lot of data, 38 lakh women in Assam, 68 lakh women in Telangana, and said, do what you want to do with it. And there was information about their academic levels. We did filter under 30 years of age and how many have completed their 8th standard and have not completed their 10th and 12th. And we arrived at a number of 2 lakhs for Assam and 6 lakhs for Telangana, and said in the first go, we would want to see if they would want to do their school completion through open schooling system in the country. And we actually want to see that While other skilling program that's there for SHG women, it actually looks at 15-day tailoring program or a 3 months program. Why not from tailoring to textile designing? Why not from beautician to cosmetologist? And that's where the income level would increase, but that requires a 2 years diploma courses, which can happen only after 10th completion or as 12th equivalent ITI courses or so. What we are really struggling with, while Telangana also happens to have adolescent SHGs, which is 15 to 18 years of age, and very much a target group for such education skilling program, problem is with money. I think the entire program is designed for loaning, for enterprise, for different sort of things, or for those 15 days to 3 months trainings, but not really to support their education, which would be 10th equivalent, 12th equivalent, diploma achievement or so. Has this been missed out, never targeted into this program? And can we apply this youth lens now, young women of India who could get us demographic dividend if we invest in their education skilling?
Thank you. We'll take one more before we take a round of answers.
Actually, it's not a question. I just wanted to add to the point of income increase. So when we talk about income increase, it's not in the term of percentage. It's also about the absolute amount. So if it is like from 5,000 to 10,000, it will show a huge increase. But that is not even for the survival, it's important. So there are two parts of it. One is that I think that both Ashini and Anjani has shared about that. So we also found that even the income increase is there, the control over income of women and decision making has nothing to do with that income increase if there are not other interventions along with those livelihood thing. And we have seen that even that 98% women have their bank account in the name, but the withdrawal autonomy or financial autonomy, if you see that 21% only can take by themselves that decision. And same is the for asset thing. Asset is 21% of women that we have studies has asset in their name, but only 14% of them actually can decide whether they can sell their assets. So it's not only that income increase will lead to the empowerment. So it's also about the kind of intervention that are designed in a manner where we are also taking care of the unpaid work of women, the gender division in the so otherwise that we are seeing women as an individual unit of economic empowerment in the that framework would not actually help. So that is our learning from the last 30 years of engagement with the women SHGs.
Thank you. Who will Dr. Singh, please?
So I'll pick up ma'am's question when she's raising the women youth questions. So one is that yes, skilling is going to be more important than 10th or 12th schooling, because if you look at when we look at livelihood centricity, it's the aspirations which is fulfilling the aspiration is important, and now the aspirations level in general of youth is going up because of advent of social media and by and large they also see the lives in cities and they also have a similar kind of aspirations, but their income is really not complementing that aspiration. So that can only happen if we really go with the skilling. That will take them to a different level. But yes, that 12th class schooling is also important for certain kinds of skilling. Because if you do not have that kind of education, some of the kinds of skilling you may not be missing out to really moving to a different level.
Can I?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so just to add to whatever he said, and I'm really surprised about this because right from the beginning, it has been very clear in the mission that the credit that is taken either from the SG's own institution, women's own institutions, or from not so much from bank, but from their own institutions, could be used both for consumption purpose as well as livelihood purposes. And in fact, in the early years, most of the credit was going for consumption purposes, building houses, education of children and all. In fact, we had to actually start focusing on credit for livelihood purposes. So they can very well take credit for this kind of education also. And I think this is an excellent thing that can be done. And as for the data is concerned about the SAG women in that particular age group, now as Sir mentioned, we have the LOCOS, and it is capturing the profile of all the SAG members. So you can also access the data of that age group members very easily.
Ma'am, but interests are very high. So only in Mancherial district in Telangana, 68% of
We'll have to.
Sorry, we're running out of time.
The time you can have it done.
Yeah. We'll take final two questions, one from Dr. Mohan and then from Montek. Yes. So Dr. Mohan, can you please?
Thank you. Thank you. First, thank you all very much for a very educational experience for someone like me in terms of what's really going on. And you could see my ignorance when I asked you for the expansion of the abbreviations. But I have a very general question, which is actually coming from a very interesting paper our colleagues have done recently. Just hand it to you, Ashwini, and TV1 as well. That so much of a discussion on women's lower labor force participation, and also in some sense the whole National Rural Livelihood Mission is not a critical thing, but that have focused on supply side intervention. Okay, what this paper has brought to attention is we need to look as much on the demand side. Now, it's not clear what you can do on the demand side apart from just overall economic growth, or what can you do specifically. And I was found very interesting that so much of the evaluations have seen there's a very very great impact of Livelihood Mission and the other programs that were all discussed in terms of some behavioral change, some gender role change, etc., but not as much on livelihoods. And that is kind of consistent that yes, what we've done is enabled people to have greater participation, to be more productive, and so on, right? Have more greater decision making in the household, etc. If gender roles change. But the question sort of is, if the demand side, and you talked about structural change, doesn't happen, then would one expect that much change on the income side? That's my question out of ignorance, really. Because I thought very interesting these results, which are consistent with the ideas in this paper.
We'll also take Montek's question.
I'm sorry to come back again. It just shows you being a late comer into this area. I'm beginning to see relationships that I should have been better informed about earlier. See, in the audience, you can see that there is a concern about what's happening to women. So it is not just a matter of the poor. You know, the most obvious thing, if you want to raise the status of women in rural areas, is please get the top 10 or the top 20% of the women involved in entrepreneurship. They come from better families, they're better endowed, they have better education. And if you make them into successful entrepreneurs, they will actually create they will be much more reliable. They'll be much more willing to depend for supply side support on women-led enterprises. So, I mean, I'm not saying this should be a government program, but, you know, something in the system should be pushing, let's say the top 30% of our rural households, and just tracking what are the women doing? Are they just being wives and mothers? It's a very desirable thing. But are they also engaging in some sort of work? Because frankly, if they were...
Full of work.
No, but the point is you guys are all working women. But what you're not doing is you're not focusing on the relevant class in the rural areas that would transform things. You're kind of getting caught into the idea that this is all for the poor, and then they're saying, don't forget the women. It's understandable. But if you're really concerned about women, I mean, look, men are going away, they don't like work, I mean, all the young boys, etc. The land is there. I mean, a lot of these women could set up tractor hiring operation, which they could actually own, and they get somebody to run the tractors. One can multiply. And I realize that you can't have a government program. But if the women's departments were aggressive, they should leave all the poverty stuff to the rural livelihood fellows and sort of work on this.
All right.
Can I
start with
yeah.
Dr. Ishmael.
So Rakesh, if I can be immodest, I'll take some credit for the fact that the demand side has been included in this paper. Because when the authors first had a meeting with me, it was a standard way in which economists look at this question, which is all supply side. I have 2 papers on the demand side. I'll send them to you. And I push the idea that you cannot look at this question only from the supply side. So I will take some credit for the fact that there's demand side being addressed here. Montek, on the question of entrepreneurship, if you look at the latest unorganized sector enterprise data, is USC data, in terms of just numbers, percentage of enterprises owned by male, female, women own a majority of the unorganized sector enterprises, but they're only confined to 4 sectors. And those are the standard kind of more stereotypically female sectors. So tailoring, apparel, food, and then one more thing, which I'm forgetting right now, but these are the 4 sectors. And these are also low in terms of the earnings they generate. So while we have in the unorganized sector, just representation of women as enterprise owners is there, it's not good enough in terms of just translating into earnings and diversification across sectors. So I take your point very well, but I think there are many dimensions to it that we also need to consider in addition to just, is it a female-owned enterprise? That's not good enough because we do have a majority of female-owned enterprises in the unorganized sector.
Dr. Kochar, please.
So I'll start with Rakesh's point first. So the starting point of my talk was that income growth comes from the expansion of markets, okay? And everything else is secondary. Then you're talking at a very low level. So that is sort of, we have put that perspective very strongly into our evaluations, several evaluations now, that in the end, you have to think of how are you connecting with markets. NRLM actually has some subcomponents that do that to a greater extent than others. And I've sort of been pushing on that, saying that's really what we need to look at. We can't just do one group here, one group there. If you're not doing this, then you're stuck in poverty. So that has to be it. So I wanted to emphasize that because I believe that very strongly. So that's why I start every talk with this. If you're not expanding markets, you're stuck in poverty. That sort of leads to this other question. So you're thinking always of, you're building this connections always. And then what you're trying to do is once you've expanded out, you can't expand out. So if, again, I'll go back to a specific example. Some villages are they're closer to town. They can build the connections, they can do it. You then have to think, if you're thinking within the NRLM mode, but even generally, how do I get those spillovers? Those aren't automatic. And so I think you sort of rephrase that problem of, okay, I know where I can get growth, and then I have to think of how I can extend it. And for women in particular, what I'm seeing, at least from the NRLM thing, and I gave that example of the CRPs, you rely on that because you have given them some entrepreneurship or income enhancing opportunity. But what you then have to do is to use them to improve the lives of other women who are never going to be entrepreneurs and just can't get there. So it's the same thing that you said, that maybe we'll start, you're talking of urban India where we can have this spillover. I think it's more logical to think of more local spillovers where they'll have more of an impact, but we can do that too. What we are not doing is sort of connecting all the dots. And so the aspects that I think are where we really need to focus and where we really need to attention and where we need to speak to policymakers is how can we do that? I'm sort of shocked at the extent to which this discussion of markets is not built into the program in a way that I put up that graph, which Rakesh saw, you have 1 PG here, 1 PG there, 1 PG there. Not going to work because you have 10 women benefiting here and 10. You have to cluster them and then you have to connect them. The plan was actually to do that. but it got lost in the implementation. So the plan was built by top level economists who said this is what we have to do, and then that goes back. Definitely, if I got it back to me one day, he probably got some advice from you, Rakesh. But there is a big. I'm struck always by just how good the economists are in India at the top government levels, but then by the time it filters down, that focus hasn't stayed there. And that's really what I think we have to work on. And yeah, sorry for taking that.
Right, thank you. I'll just. I just want to formally thank everyone for joining us today. To our panelists, this was such an engaging and rich discussion. Wouldn't have been possible without your time and your engagement. Thank you so much. And thank you to our audience that stuck through the afternoon. And thank you for being here. And please join us for snacks and tea. And
Samosas and tea also.
yes, please. And hopefully we can continue the conversation.